The job paid $12 an hour and it required a pulse. That was about the full extent of the qualifications. I had been out of work for almost 3 months when I got the call from Bev Norris at Crestwood Valley Mall. I had applied to so many jobs by that point that I didn't even remember submitting the application. She left a voicemail while I was asleep, and I called her back from my kitchen while I was still half awake, and 20 minutes later I had the job. Night security, alone, 6 nights a week. My name is Cal and I'm 34. I grew up about 40 minutes from Crestwood, and I've been to that mall maybe 100 times in my life. Birthday parties when I was a kid, the arcade in the back corner, and the food court with the little Sbarro that my mom loved. I knew the place the way everybody around here knew it, which is to say that I remembered it the way that it used to be, not the way that it actually was anymore. I drove out from my first shift on a Tuesday in February, and the parking lot alone was enough to get under my skin. It was enormous, built to hold thousands of cars, and there were maybe 30 scattered across it like loose change on a table. Security lights on tall poles cast everything in that yellow-orange glow that makes the world look like an old photograph. The building itself was massive and low and dark, with a few lit signs near the main entrance that buzzed and flickered. And Bev met me at the side entrance. She was a short woman in her late 50s with reading glasses pushed up on her head and a permanent expression of mild exhaustion. She handed me a radio, a flashlight, a key ring with what felt like 40 keys on it, and a laminated sheet with the names and phone numbers of people to call in various situations. She walked me through the rounds, which took about 20 minutes to explain and about 45 minutes to actually complete. The mall had 2 levels. The upper level was where most of the remaining tenants were, mostly clustered near the east entrance. The lower level was storage and maintenance, and it had been mostly off-limits to tenants for going on 2 years due to some drainage issue that Bev described vaguely and moved past quickly. The whole time she was showing me around, I was taking in the place. I hadn't been inside in probably 8 years, and it had changed completely in the way that empty spaces change, which is to say that it had stopped feeling like a place where things happened and started feeling like the memory of one. The storefronts were dark and gutted. Some of them still had signage. A shoe store, a jewelry kiosk with the glass cases still in place, but nothing inside of them. A kid's clothing store with 3 plastic mannequins left behind, still dressed in clothes that had probably been there for 5 years. The main corridor was wide and the ceiling was high, and the skylights were dark with night, and the fountain in the center was dry, and it had been for a long time. And near the east corridor there was a carousel. It was covered with a large tarp, lashed down with bungee cords. Even under the tarp you could see these shapes of the horses, their heads and necks pressing against the fabric. I stared at it for a second, and Bev said, almost to herself, that it had been covered since the spring, and nobody could agree on who was responsible for doing something with it. She also pointed out the old arcade at the back of the upper level, tucked behind where the food court had ended. Galaxy Games, the sign above the entrance still said, though the G had gone dark, so it just read Galaxy Games in flickering blue letters. The inside was completely dark. Most of the machines were still in there, she said, because the company that owned them had gone under before they could collect them, and the cost of removing them had become one of those things that nobody wanted to pay for. She pulled the door shut and said that I didn't need to go in there during rounds unless I heard something, and that sometimes the old machines made noise on their own because of the cold. At the end of the walkthrough, she almost forgot to give me the rules. She pulled them out of her desk drawer, a folded piece of paper, and handed it to me the way that you would hand somebody a takeout menu. She said the previous guard had left them and that she thought some of it was a little dramatic, but that it didn't hurt to know them. And then she put on her coat and left. I heard her car start in the parking lot and take off. I unfolded the paper and read it, standing at the security desk. There were 7 rules. They were handwritten in neat, careful block letters, like the person who wrote them had wanted to make sure that they were legible. 1. Do not enter the old J.C. Penney wing after 10 at night. 2. If you hear music from the food court, do not follow it. 3. If somebody waves at you from inside a dark storefront, do not wave back. 4. If you smell popcorn and can't find where it's coming from, sit down wherever you are, close your eyes, and count to 60. Do not open them before you finish counting. 5. If you see a child inside the mall at night, call the police right away. Do not approach the child. 6. Stay out of the service corridors behind the stores after 11 at night. 7. Never go to the lower level alone, for any reason. I read it over twice, then I folded the paper and put it in my jacket pocket. I thought the previous guy had probably just worked too many nights alone in a creepy building, and had started filling in the silence with stories. I had done plenty of night shifts at a factory, and there's something about the dark and quiet that the brain doesn't like. It fills in the blanks. It makes things up. That first night was quiet. I did my rounds twice, I drank 2 cups of coffee from a thermos, and I watched half a movie on my phone. I drove home at 6 in the morning with the sky just starting to go gray, and thought about how the job was going to be mostly fine. Now I want to be precise about when things started feeling different, because it wasn't all at once. The first 4 nights were fairly quiet, but on the 5th night I smelled popcorn. It was sometime after midnight and I was on the upper level near the old shoe store when it hit me. It was strong and warm, the way that popcorn smells when you walk into a movie theater. That buttery salt smell that goes straight to some part of your brain that remembers being a kid. I stopped walking. I looked around. There was no source for it. The nearest occupied tenant was a cellular carrier store near the east entrance, and they had been closed since 9 o'clock. I thought about rule number 4. I thought how ridiculous it was. And then I sat down on the edge of the dry fountain, closed my eyes, and I counted to 60. It felt embarrassing, honestly. Sitting alone in a dark mall at midnight with my eyes closed, counting in my head like a child playing hide and seek. I got to 60 and I opened my eyes. The corridor looked the same. Dark storefronts, low light, the tarp-covered carousel down the way. But something felt different in a way that I couldn't explain. The way a room sometimes feels different after you've been in it for a long time. Like the air had settled. The popcorn smell was gone. I finished my rounds and told myself that it was probably just the ventilation system pulling something up from somewhere. Old buildings do weird things. That was what I told myself, and most of me believed it. The music happened on my 9th night. I was in the food court doing my pass-through when I heard it. Soft at first, coming from these ceiling speakers, the kind of music they used to play in malls everywhere. That soft, inoffensive 80s pop that just sort of existed in the background of every shopping trip that you ever took as a kid. I couldn't make out the song at first. I took a step toward the far end of the food court where these speakers seemed to be the strongest. I stopped. I stood completely still and I waited. The music kept playing, faint and smooth and oddly comforting, the way that a familiar smell is comforting. I had the strong urge just to walk toward it, to find the speaker that it was coming from and to figure out what was going on. I mean, there was no reason not to investigate. I was the security guard and that was literally my job. But I had stood in a dark, empty mall at midnight and counted to 60 for no reason. And something had changed when I did. And so I stayed where I was. I stood in the food court with my hands in my pockets, and I listened to that music and didn't move. It played for maybe 4 minutes and then it stopped, right in the middle of a note like somebody had pulled a plug. The silence that replaced it was the kind that presses on your ears. I did the rest of my rounds quickly and I didn't go back to the food court until the next pass, and by then there was nothing. Just the chairs and tables and the long dark shuttered storefronts, and the smell of old grease that had soaked into everything over the decades. On my 11th night, the arcade came alive. I was finishing up the upper level pass, coming around the back end of the food court toward the Galaxy Games entrance, when I saw the light. Not a flashlight, not a thin beam of something that I could explain away. The entire inside of the arcade was flickering, machine by machine, like they were waking up in sequence. The glow coming from the entrance was blue and orange and green, old screen colors, the specific light of a dozen games cycling through their attract modes all at once. I stopped at the entrance. The machines were all going, Pac-Man and Galaga, one of the big racing cabinets near the back wall, a row of pinball machines along the left side, their play fields lit up and bumpers flashing. The sound was low but present. All those digital bleeps and chimes and engine noises layered together into something that should have been familiar but wasn't. It was familiar the way that a word looks wrong if you stare at it for too long. There was no power reason for any of this. The arcade had been disconnected from the tenant power grid when the operator had went under. Bev had told me that herself. But I stood at the entrance and watched the machines run their loops and I thought about the rules. None of them said anything specifically about the arcade. None of them said not to go in, or don't look at the machines, or stay out after a certain time. There wasn't any rule about this, which meant either it had never happened when he was here, or he had never come back from it to write it down. That second thought sat in my chest like a cold stone. I was still standing there when I heard the laughter. It came from the back of the arcade, from somewhere past the racing cabinet and the rows of machines where the lights didn't quite reach. A child laughing, high and clear, the kind of laugh that belongs to somebody who's just won a game or has gotten a good score. The kind of sound that every single one of my instincts said to move toward. I didn't move. The laugh came again, a little closer this time, like whatever was making it had moved up one row of machines. I could hear it picking its way through the arcade, and somehow that was worse than if it had just been stationary. Something was moving in there, something that knew that I was at the entrance. And then one by one, the machines in the front row of the arcade went dark. And then the second row. Like the light was retreating toward the back, pulling away from me and whatever was in there retreating with it, drawing back, pulling the brightness away from the entrance and deeper into the arcade. I understood what it wanted me to do. It wanted me to walk in after it, follow the light and the laughter deeper into that space until I was far enough in that whatever waited at the back could do what it did. I turned around and I walked at a steady pace. I did not run. No way I was going in there. Behind me for about half a minute, I could still hear the laughter. It didn't sound angry or frustrated. It just kept going, light and easy. The sound of a kid having the best afternoon of their life in an arcade that had been dark and dead for years. By the time that I reached the main corridor, it had stopped. I sat on the edge of that dry fountain again and closed my eyes, and I counted to 60 without anybody telling me to. When I opened them, the mall was quiet. It was still, and I was alone in it. And the corridor back toward the food court was dark the whole way through. I added the arcade to my rounds as a visual check only, from the entrance and never inside. That felt like the right call. And nothing that happened afterward made me think that it was wrong. On the 12th night, I saw the girl. I was doing the East Corridor pass, coming up on the carousel, when I saw her standing about 10 feet from the covered horses. She was small, maybe 7 or 8 years old, wearing a puffy winter coat with a fur-trimmed hood, the kind that used to be popular when I was a kid. She was just standing there with her arms at her sides, facing me. My stomach dropped. There was no reason on earth for a child to be in this building at this hour. I pulled up my phone and called the non-emergency line, like Rule 5 had said to do. I kept my eyes on the girl while I talked to the dispatcher. I told them that there was a child alone in the mall. I gave my location and I stayed on the line. The whole time I watched the girl and she watched me and neither of us moved. It took Officer Trent about 12 minutes to get there. I know because I was staring at my phone the whole time watching the clock. When I heard the door open and Trent's footsteps in the corridor, I looked away from the girl for maybe 2 seconds. As you can guess it, when I looked back, she was gone. Trent scoped out the area with me and then did a loop on the main floor and didn't find anything. He was polite about it in the way that people are polite when they think you've wasted their time. He said that kids sometimes go into malls through propped service doors and that it happened more often than people thought. He said to call back if I ever saw her again. After he left, I stood near the carousel for a long time. The tarp shifted a little in the draft from the heating vents, the horse-shaped lumps underneath pressing against the fabric. 2 nights later, I was sitting in the security office between rounds when I noticed the corkboard on the wall. It was covered in papers and business cards and a couple of printed photos, the kind of thing that accumulates in many offices over the years. I glanced at the photos. Most of them were pictures of the mall from what looked like the 80s or early 90s, the kind of shots you take when you're proud of a place. The mall full of people, the fountain running, the carousel going around and around, bright and lit up. Families all watching it and having a good time. I was almost done looking when I found the one near the carousel. It was a wide shot taken from the East Corridor. In the foreground, a couple of kids were pointing at the horses. In the background, standing just off to the side with her arms at her sides, was a small girl in a puffy winter coat with a fur-trimmed hood. I sat with that photo for a long time. The date printed on the bottom edge said March 1988. I told myself that there were probably dozens of kids who had worn that same coat. I mean, it was pretty popular. It was nothing. But I didn't really believe that. And I think somewhere I'd stopped believing it when the music played and I felt that pull toward the food court and had understood, on some level, that I didn't want to look at it directly. That the pull hadn't been a curiosity. I asked Bev about the previous guard the next afternoon when she was doing a walkthrough of the tenant spaces. She was a practical woman who I had mostly liked up until the moment that I had asked her about Denny Marsh. I had found his name on a laminated employee ID tacked near the security desk. The photo showed a heavy-set man in his mid-40s with a gray beard and a tired, kind smile. He looked like somebody's dad. When I said his name, Bev stopped walking. She didn't look at me right away, and then she said that Denny had been a good employee for 6 years, and that what had happened to him was a tragedy, and that she didn't like to talk about it. I pushed a little gently and she told me the basics. About 18 months ago, the morning crew had come in to find Denny's car in the lot. His round logs were up to date through 4 in the morning. But after that, nothing. No Denny. The police had looked into it for a while and never found an explanation. The case was technically still open. She told me this in a flat, reciting kind of voice, like something that she had said many times and wanted to say as few times going forward as possible. And then she changed the subject and walked me to the east anchor space to talk about a leak in the ceiling tiles, and I let her change the subject because there wasn't much else to say. That night before my shift, I sat in the security office and I looked at Denny's employee photo for a while. A gray beard, a tired smile. 6 years in this building at night, all alone. He had made those rules, every single one of them. And then one night he had been here and then he hadn't been here, and his car was still in the lot. I did my first round that night earlier than usual. The JCPenney wing ran off the south end of the main corridor, a long straight stretch of empty storefronts leading to the old anchor space at the end, which had been gutted and dark for 3 years. It was the part of the mall that felt the emptiest, which was saying something. Even the lighting was worse in there. Some of the overhead fixtures had given out without anybody bothering to replace them. I had been in the wing on my rounds before, but always before 10. Always quick and always in and out. On my 15th night, I was coming up in the entrance to the JCPenney wing at around 10:30 when I saw the figure. It was standing at the far end of the wing, in front of the dark anchor space doors. Too far to make out clearly, but it was human-shaped and facing me, and it was standing still. I realized that I had taken 2 or 3 steps into the wing without deciding to. I stopped. The figure didn't move. It just stood there at the end of that long, dark corridor, and I stood at the near end, and the distance between us was maybe 100 yards of empty mall. I backed out of the wing back into the main corridor, and I stood in the light for a while. My heart was doing something uncomfortable in my chest. After a minute, I thought about what I had seen, about the shape of the figure, the build of the jacket, and I went back to the security office. I looked at Denny Marsh's employee photo. I didn't finish my rounds that night. I sat in the security office until 6 in the morning and I didn't leave it. I want to tell you about the night with the vision because it's the hardest thing to explain. Not because of what I saw, but because of how real it was, and because of how close I came to not coming back from it. It was my 18th night. I was doing a round of the main corridor near the dry fountain. It was late, maybe around 2 in the morning. I was really tired that night, so much so that everything had that slightly unreal quality to it. Pair that with an old abandoned mall and it makes sense. The popcorn smell hit me hard and fast, not gradual like before, but immediate, like walking through a door into a different room. I reached for rule 4 in my head and I was actually starting to sit down on the edge of the fountain when the mall had changed. I don't have a better word for it, but it changed. One moment I was in the Crestwood Valley Mall of right now, dark and empty and half dead. And then I was transported back to the mall of 1989, and it was 3 in the afternoon on a busy Saturday. The lights were blazing. Every store was open and lit up and full of people. I could hear the fountain behind me, the water running, the coins glinting in it. The carousel was going around and around, horses moving up and down. A little girl in a puffy coat watching it with her hands together. The ceiling speakers were playing something that I remembered from when I was young. One of those songs that just always had been there in the background of your life. The smell of these Sbarro hit me, pizza and garlic, and underneath it, the popcorn from the cart near the east entrance, and the perfume from the department store. All of it together was so specifically right that my chest ached with something that took me a second to recognize as longing. People moved past me. A teenager talking on a payphone near the service corridor. A family with a stroller. The dad holding shopping bags in both hands. 2 older women with mall walker sneakers moving briskly down the corridor. None of them looked at me. None of them reacted to me. But they were there. I could almost feel the air displacement as they passed by. And from the back of the upper level past the food court, the arcade was blazing. Full color, full sound, every machine running. A crowd of kids in acid-wash jeans clustered around the racing cabinets and the pinball machines, their laughter carrying all the way down the main corridor. I could see it from where I was standing, that warm glow, and I wanted to walk to it the way that you want to walk toward a fire in the cold. And deep down I knew that it wasn't real. I want to be clear about that. Some part of me, some small clear part, was screaming that this was not real. But my body didn't know that. My body was already moving, following the flow of foot traffic and drifting east, drifting toward the carousel and the little girl, and the light and the sound of those kids in the arcade laughing at whatever was on the screen in front of them. What brought me back was the tarp. My hand had caught the edge of it, that rough synthetic fabric, and the texture of it was completely wrong for 1989. Wrong for the bright, crowded Saturday afternoon. Wrong for everything that the vision was telling me. I grabbed it hard, got a hold of it, and held on. I closed my eyes and I counted to 60, slowly and carefully, really focusing on each number. I counted past 60 all the way up to 100. When I opened my eyes, I was standing in the dark and empty mall, both hands gripping the tarp over the carousel, and the JCPenney wing entrance was about 30 feet ahead of me. I had walked 30 feet without knowing that I was walking. I sat down on the floor right there in the corridor, and I stayed down until my hands had stopped shaking. Then I got up and went back to the security office, and I sat in there and I thought seriously about how to find a different job. I decided to call it quits the next morning. I know that might sound like the obvious choice looking back, but I had about $200 in my account and no other prospects. And the process of choosing to leave something that you need is more complicated than people who have never been broke understand. But I decided I would tell Bev at the end of the shift. I would ask for my last paycheck and I would figure out the rest of it. I walked to the parking lot at the end of my shift and I got in my car and turned the key and got nothing. Not a sputter, not a click. Complete silence. The battery was dead. It had been fine the night before, but it was dead now. I called a friend who lived about 25 minutes away and he said that he would come with jumper cables, but that he was still in bed and it would probably be an hour, maybe more. I told him that that was fine. I went back inside because it was February and standing in that parking lot was not an option. I told myself that it was just a fluke. I told myself that these things happen. I was just going to go sit in the security office and wait until my friend was going to come and jump the car, and I was going to drive away from this place and never come back. And that's what I was trying to do. I was sitting in the security office with a cup of coffee watching something on my phone when the music had started from the food court. I turned my phone off and I sat still, and then I smelled the popcorn. And then from somewhere down the back of the upper level, from the direction of the arcade, I heard it. Children laughing. The same way that it had sounded before. That high, easy sound that carried all the way down the corridor and through the walls, and it sat in the middle of my chest like a hand pressing inward. More than one voice this time, a group of them. All three at once, and even though I knew what was happening, even though I understood by now that each one of these things was a lure, a hook designed for a specific instinct, the combined weight of all three was tremendous. My whole body wanted to get up and move, the urge to investigate, to help, to follow the familiar comfort of that smell and that sound. It was almost physical. It pressed on me from all sides. I did not get up. I counted again in my head 3 times in a row, eyes open, staring at the wall across from me. The laughter kept going for a while. It would shift in pitch, sometimes sounding closer and sometimes farther away, like it was moving through the upper level in a slow loop, working its way around the food court, drifting toward the main corridor. I understood that it was testing the distance, seeing how close it could get before I moved. When I finally stopped counting, the laughter had faded, but the smell of popcorn was still there, faint but present, like it was still waiting. And then something moved past the window of the security office. The office had a window that looked out into the main corridor, a wide pane of glass that Denny had probably used to watch for shoplifters back when there were still shoplifters. I was looking right at it when the figure passed in front of it. It moved slowly and it was the right height, the right build. The gray beard was visible even in the dim corridor light, and the jacket was the same one that Denny was wearing in his photo. It stopped just past the window and then slowly, it turned its head toward me. Its eyes found mine through the glass. I've tried a lot of times since that night to describe what was wrong with its face, and the best that I can do is this. It looked like somebody had assembled it carefully from the right pieces and then gotten the timing slightly off. The proportions were correct, but something about the way that it held itself, the way that its face settled into an expression, it was wrong in a way that went past wrong into something that made my whole nervous system light up at once. It looked at me through the window, and I looked back. I thought about his rules. I ran through all 7 of them in my head one by one, and I understood them differently than I had before. Each one was a wall against a specific kind of movement. Don't follow the music, don't approach the child, don't follow the smell, don't go into the dark wing, don't follow the laughter from the arcade. Each one existed because the hollow, whatever it was, whatever lived beneath this building in the old limestone dark, understood exactly how humans were built, and to use that knowledge the way that you use a key. It found the door in you that matched the key that it had, and it turned it. It couldn't reach up and take anyone. I was certain of that. It could only lead. It could only pull. Every lure that it made required you to walk toward it on your own 2 feet, and the rules existed to keep you from doing that. I went through all 7 and then I noticed something cold and simple. None of the rules had addressed the door. There was nothing in Denny's list about what to do if something knocked. The thing outside my window raised its hand and it knocked on the glass. 3 times, slow and deliberate. I held very still. It knocked again. It watched me with that slightly off face and the eyes that were almost right. I thought about Denny. 6 years that he had worked here. 6 years of following those rules and building that list, adding to it every time he found a new edge of the thing's territory. 6 years of knowing that it was under this building, and that it was patient and that it would never stop. And at the end of those 6 years, his car was in the parking lot and he was somewhere else, not somewhere that I could find him. I thought about what that meant, and then I sat in the security office with my hands flat on the desk, and I watched the thing that looked like Denny knock on my window, and I did not open the door. It knocked for a long time. It tried the handle twice. It stood at the window and watched me with its assembled face and its eyes, and I sat across from it and watched it back, and neither of us moved. Somewhere around 5 in the morning, the light had started to change. Not fast, just gradually, the way it does in February when dawn comes reluctant and gray. The skylights above began to show the first thin light. The thing outside the window stopped knocking. It stood there for a minute or 2 just watching me, and then it turned and walked away down the corridor toward the south end of the mall, and I watched it until it was out of sight. I stayed in the office until I heard my friend's truck in the parking lot. He jumped the car and I thanked him, and I drove home and I slept for about 10 hours. When I woke up, it was dark again, and I lay in bed for a while thinking about what I was going to do. I mean, I needed the job, that was still true. Nothing about the previous night had changed that particular fact of my life. I lay there and I did the math that I had already done a dozen times, and I came to the same answer that I always came to. I went back. Bev was doing paperwork when I came in. She handed me a coffee without being asked and went back to her papers. I went to the security desk and started my pre-shift checks the way that I always did. I don't know exactly why I looked at that corkboard again, maybe just out of habit. I had looked at it every shift since I had found that 1988 photo, always half expecting to see something different. And this time something was different. There was a new photo pinned near the top. It was a wide shot of the main corridor in what looked like a busy afternoon, sometime in the late 80s, based on the clothes and the storefronts. Dozens of people moving through the mall in both directions, the fountain running, the carousel spinning. I almost moved on, and then I looked at the background. Near the fountain, barely visible behind a group of teenagers, was a figure standing completely still while everybody around them moved. Modern jacket, modern work boots, a flashlight clipped to his belt. It was me. I looked at the date printed on the bottom edge of the photo. April 1988. I've thought about it every night since. I think about the thing that looked like Denny knocking on the glass while I held still and counted until dawn. I think about what that photo means. Whether it's a thread or a record or just the hollow showing me that it's patient. That it measures time differently than I do. That 6 years or 30 years or 100 years are all the same distance from where it waits. I still follow the rules, all 7 of them. Every night without exception. I just added one more. Rule 8. If something knocks, do not open the door. Today's episode is sponsored by Hims. Trying to lose weight can feel a lot like wandering through the dark. You hear 100 different opinions and everybody claims they've got the answer, and somehow you're still stuck in the same place. And that's why Weight Loss by Hims is worth checking out. Hims now offers access to an affordable range of FDA-approved GLP-1 medications, including the Wegovy pill and the Wegovy pen. With Wegovy at Hims, lose up to 20% or more of your body weight when combined with diet and exercise. It helps regulate your appetite and eat less, making it easier to stay on track with your goals. Everything happens online. You'll connect with a licensed provider who can determine if treatment is right for you. If prescribed, your medication is delivered right to your door. No insurance necessary. Plus, Hims offers access to 24/7 messaging with your care team and in-app lifestyle support, including nutrition guidance, recipes, meal plans, fitness videos, sleep content, and more. Are you ready to reach your goals? Visit hims.com/MrCreeps to get a personalized, affordable plan that gets you. That's hims.com/MrCreeps. hims.com/MrCreeps. Weight Loss by Hims is not available in all 50 states. Wegovy is the registered trademark of Novo Nordisk AS. To get started and learn more, including important safety information, Wegovy clinical study information and restrictions, visit hims.com. Can you sign for this? The impatient UPS driver said after handing me a small box. I'm not expecting anything. Who's it from? They shrugged. I just deliver 'em, man. Maybe somebody out there wanted to surprise you with a gift. I signed and they headed to their next stop. I looked down at the box in my hands. There wasn't a return address. Despite its size, the package was heavy. Inside, I found 3 things. A plain brass urn, an old hand-drawn map, and a small note written in my grandpa's handwriting. This was odd for several reasons, most notably because I'd heard my grandpa had died 6 months earlier. We weren't close. In my defense, he wasn't close to anyone. He successfully drove off 2 wives, 3 kids, and 6 grandkids. Shed all of us as easily as a squirrel climbing a tree. He was the kind of man who would buy a cake for a party, only to serve himself a slice and throw the rest away. Money allowed him to pursue his more eccentric hobbies, hunting local legends, searching for rare artifacts, and chasing legacy. Often those three things came together in a layered cake of poor decisions. Before he died, he had gotten embroiled in a real estate purchase that had anchored an entire small town. And Grandpa had that effect on people. For some reason, I had been sent these things. My relationship with Grandpa was walk-in freezer chilly at best, and yet he had sent me his earthly remains. I shook the urn, and the ashes switched back and forth. The map was hand-drawn and had yellowed with age. It was a map of his most recent purchase, but this was older than that. He had his eye on that tract of land for quite a while. Weeks after finally buying it, he was a corpse. C'est la vie. There were 3 labeled things, each more ominous sounding than the last. First was the home that he had purchased in the woods. He called it Birch Tree Manor, and with his taste, I envisioned an overbuilt, ostentatious mansion. The second was a body of water near the path, lovingly titled the Nightmare Pool. Lastly, there was a stilted house with the words, "The Moving Hut," written under it. With panoramic views of the Nightmare Pool, I do imagine that it was valuable. I put the map aside and pulled up the letter. This had been written more recently because the words were shakier than the map labels. I didn't know why he had wanted this land so badly, but he had sacrificed everything in his life to get it. It read, "Dear grandson, we've never had any familial bond outside the blood coursing through your veins and a shared surname. I won't bother you with saccharine musings. We're both too old and jaded for such a claptrap. I approach you as a man with a proposition, a business deal as it were. You may choose to deny this, as is your wont, but denying it might have ill consequences for you. Deadly consequences even." "Cool," I mumbled. He continued, "I recently purchased a large tract of valuable land. The purchase was not well received by the locals. I did not purchase this land to become a member of their community of inbred goons. I bought the land to pursue a goal that I've had for decades. If you're reading this letter, then I've accomplished my goal, but at the cost of my life. Understanding the unknown, meeting a being older than mankind, was worth the sacrifice." That stopped me. Meeting a being older than mankind, sacrifices. What had Grandpa been into during his isolation years? Why couldn't he have become obsessed with golf like every other old guy? The note went on. "However, my knowledge came at a cost. In exchange for it, I promised my ashes in return. If they are not delivered promptly, the Nagi Chuwasi will find you. It will not stop its torment until you live up to my side of the deal. I'm not one to apologize, but as a gentleman, I understand that you must be rewarded for your services. I have instructed my lawyer to grant you title to the land and house upon completion of this task. Keep it or sell it back to the locals. It is your decision to make. This is not a jape. If you fail to do this, the next body in the ground will be yours. In death, Walter J. Insington." I stood there dumbfounded, the letter flagging in my hands. Was this real or some elaborate joke? This was a lot to take in and something I needed to mull over. Give myself a night to sleep on it and tackle the problem with fresh eyes. I went to bed that night undecided. I wouldn't wake up the same way. My dreams were so vivid they tipped over into reality. I was in the woods. I remember being cold, goosebumps prickling on my arms. The stench of death lingered in the air. I strode past twisted oaks, peeling birch, and minaret-like pines, each casting shadows that made me think murderous creatures were spying on me. The tree canopies formed a tunnel above my head as I walked the well-worn rut of a path. No sunlight touched this ground. A gathering fog had thickened, restricting my vision to a few feet in front of me. The noises started not long after. Footsteps all around me. Dozens of figures running through the fog, watching me, waiting. The sound of trees crash into the ground. The vibration of their thuds shook my organs. I came across a set of hoof prints in the dirt. They were the size of a car tire. A vine fell from the canopy and struck me on my back. As it hit, an intense burning sensation rippled through my shoulder. I woke up screaming in a cold sweat. My fingers flew to the spot where the vine had struck me. I had expected to find smooth skin, but the tips of my fingers found the flaky peels of a burn. I winced in pain, and when I pulled back my fingers, there were small smears of blood on the tips. I had been marked. I left for the long drive to Grandpa's land in the morning. As the mile markers ticked down, a heavy sense of unease weighed on me. How did I feel guilty for the actions that he took? I glanced over at the urn sitting in the passenger seat and realized this was probably the most time that I had ever spent with them. Even in dust form, he was a menace. I got to the town at dusk. There wasn't much to it. A few squat, red brick buildings down a dying main street. Everything looked ragged, used up, like somebody had painted the town with a brush labeled Blight. I found a motel close to the property and I booked a room. While signing in, I wanted to gauge the town's response to Grandpa. I didn't want to share that we were related, but I needed to know how riled up the hornet's nest was. The buzzing had been evident from his note, but I didn't really understand the rage they had for the man until the first sting found me. Oh, he was a piece of shit that meddled in things he didn't understand for selfish reasons. Doris, the motel worker, told me as she handed over my room key. She was a 70-year-old grandma of 5 who could double as a cookie company mascot. Prim and proper with makeup-assisted rosy cheeks, and hair so well put together you would swear that it was a wig. She pulled no punches. When I heard he died, I thanked the Lord and poured myself a shot of rum. I hadn't drunk a drop of alcohol for 30 years, but it was worth it. Wow, I said, taking the key and praying she didn't connect my last name to his. Why was he so hated? Oh, he went against the wishes of the locals for his own gain. His tortured death was well earned. Tortured? She laughed. Oh yes, if Nagi Chuwasi got a hold of him, then he suffered. Nagi? Chuwasi, monster that stays in the woods. Well, used to anyway. That Insington cursed us all. She stopped and stared at me with a furrowed brow. Why are you asking about him? How did you even hear about this? I'm a reporter, I lied. He was a wealthy man who messed around with the supernatural. We're just following up on this lead. Uh-huh, she said, not totally buying my line. You want to interview me? Sure, I said. What do you think Mr. Insington's legacy is around these parts? Oh, he was a plague rat. He helped the darkness escape the woods. It's creeping into our daily lives. The town's dying, you saw it. For that alone, he deserves any ignominy. You can quote me on that too. What do you mean he helped the darkness escape? Oh, he went and bothered the Nagi Chuwasi. It doesn't like to be bothered. Now it's bothering everyone until it gets what it wants. She set her gaze on me. Your father really screwed us over 8 ways from Sunday. Well, hell, the jig was up. I needed to do damage control before I became the target of everyone's ire. Grandfather, I said, and we didn't like him either. I'm here to right his wrongs. Uh-huh, Doris said. Forgive me if I'm skeptical. I'd be skeptical too. I have no desire to keep the land. You can't keep what you don't own. I was confused. He bought the area. I have the paperwork. You may have the paperwork that says you own the land, but paperwork ain't gonna save you when the Nagachuwasi comes around. It's been here since the trees were acorns. That whole area is crawling with magical shit, but Nagachuwasi is the boss hog. Anyone with any sense stays away from its lair. If I were you, I would heed that advice. And Doris returned to her crossword, and I took that as my cue to leave. She had said her piece to me, and it was clear that she was not a fan. Her anger with Grandpa was palpable. I understood that. I stayed inside my room for the rest of the night. No need to risk anyone else discovering who I was. If Doris told anyone, no matter where I went, I'd be toast. Not wanting to be forced to defend my actions or to be seen as sympathetic to someone I didn't like in the first place held no appeal to me. At about 10, a creeping fog formed and slowly marched toward the motel. It was dense, and after it overtook the building, your vision was limited to a foot or two. The motel itself wasn't creepy, but with the modified landscape, the creep factor ticked up a notch. It was hard not to think Nagachuwasi didn't have something to do with this. I had gone out to grab a soda and a snack, only to find Doris standing outside her office, staring off into the thick wall of fog. "You see anything?" I asked. "Oh, when this pea soup rolls in, you only see what Nagachuwasi wants you to see," she said, shaking her head. "I should ask if you see anything. If I figured out who you were, the Nagachuwasi will too." I held up my snacks. I just see trail mix and RC Cola." "Oh, just wait," she said before turning back into her office. "Not at all ominous," I said, returning to my room. At around 2 in the morning, somebody started knocking at my door. Well, knocking is the polite way of saying it. They pounded their fists against the metal. The entire wall rattled from the blows. I woke up in a stupor and took a few seconds to reorient myself. "Hello?" I called out into the darkness. No response. Great. I cracked open the door. The fog, thicker than before, curled around the edges. It brought with it the stench of bloated, day-old roadkill cooking in the sun. I nearly gagged. "Is someone out there?" I said to the wall of white fog, the air swirling around the parking lot lights. Nothing. No spoken response, that is. Out in the parking lot, something skittered along the blacktop. Hoofs on asphalt. A deer sprang to mind, but I knew that it wasn't a deer. More movement out in front of me. The sound of limbs dragging along the ground. The discordant noises of the body against the uneven driveway made my blood run cold. "Hello," came a voice from the fog. It was ragged, strained. "You smell just like him, boy." The voice started cackling. Nah, no time for that. I locked the door and backed away. Any part of my brain that may have been stuck in slumber mode had switched on. The thought of running home and forgetting all of this crossed my mind, but then the sting of pain in my shoulder twitched, and I knew if I ran that it would follow. Something hit my window. I yelped and dove behind my bed. There were 3 more bangs against the glass. I had drawn the curtains closed and was glad that I did. I had no desire to see what was out there. With a sudden crash, the glass shattered and something came flying into my room. The curtains blew back from the force, the fog raced in. The object skidded across my bed and landed with a wet slap. I turned around and tried to block out whatever was happening. When I finally found the bravery to look, I threw up my cola and trail mix. Tiny bits of red and yellow M&Ms floating in a dark cola pond. The hacked-up body of a raccoon slumped against the far wall. Its body mangled from dozens of stab wounds. Blood leaching into the carpet fibers. Drips of viscera cascading down from my bed. The smell was atrocious. "Oh, what's with all the noise? Oh, hell's bells." It was Doris. She was holding a set of antlers, their tips stained red and dripping. "Oh, now it's attacking my building." I popped up from behind the bed and the mighty grandma stood there, hands on her hips, staring into my room through the shattered window. "What?" was all that I got out. She sighed. "Oh, your grandpa did this. He gonna pay for this window." I stuttered. "I don't know what happened." "Is that blood on the mattress?" "Oh, some guts too, it's from the raccoon." "Jesus Christ and his freeloading disciples," she said. "What happened?" "Oh, you know what happened. Your family has doomed us all." Doris waved her hand at me in disgust. "Whatever you came to do, hop to it. You're putting us all in danger." "I'm going in the morning," I said. "Oh, it's morning now," she said. "It's dark." "It's only gonna get darker until you get moving," she said, her voice rising. "This thing won't leave us alone. It won't leave you alone until you do whatever you came to do." "I am," I said, standing and crossing to the shattered window. "First light." "At this rate, there ain't gonna be a first light. Get moving or get out of the room." "Are you kicking me out?" "I'm setting you on the path to fix this mess." She was serious. I nervously laughed. "Doris, be reasonable. You want me to go now?" "This is me being reasonable," she said in a huff. "Leave or else I'll tell the town that rat, Insington's relation, is here and riling up the Nagachuasi. You think I'm being mean? Wait until they come with pitchforks and torches." "You can't be. Get moving, or I start calling folks with loaded guns and no scruples." I sighed. I had been backed into a corner by a crotchety septuagenarian, and there was no escape. She was right. If she made a few phone calls, I'd be facing down the entire furious town. There'd be pain. Immense pain. And the other option wasn't great either. Walking into the dark forest while a supernatural creature stalked me. All for the pleasure of burying the ashes of a man that I didn't like in the first place. Some people inherit ugly furniture or worthless tiny spoons when their grandparents die. I inherited a curse. I'd take those tiny spoons any day of the week. 15 minutes later, with Doris haranguing me the entire time, I gathered the map, urn, and a flashlight and set off for Grandpa's house. Even if I wanted to turn tail and run, Doris stayed near my car and made sure that I left for the woods. "Any advice?" I asked before departing. "If you hear a voice in the woods, don't answer," she said. "Now get. The sooner this is over, the sooner we can go back to living a normal life. I don't need to worry about murdered raccoons or talking sparrows or God knows what else." Doris stayed and watched me disappear into the fog, staying even as the clouds overtook me and left me as nothing but a memory. From Doris's directions, I knew the map was about 15 minutes from the hotel. From there, the map would have to suffice. I kept my pace brisk and tried to block out any dark thoughts rolling around inside my head. I focused on the crunching of my own footsteps on the leaf-strewn path. Ahead of me lay an entrance into the forest. It was surrounded by 2 soaring oaks, wooden watchmen, forever holding the line. I climbed over a dead-end road barricade, past the oaks, and took my first few steps into the forest proper. As I did, a chill crossed my skin. The cold and heavy feeling of somebody dragging a dulled knife across your arm. It moved around me like it was absorbing me until it no longer felt different. Just another sensation you become numb to. To keep my mind busy, I counted the steps between markers on the map. Anything to avoid dealing with what might be watching from the fog. 55, 56, 50. 7. A small voice said from the fog. I stopped. I turned the flashlight to the left and scanned the dense fog for anything standing there. The light didn't capture anything, The glance to the right had the same result. The beam bounced because my hand was struggling to stay still.
57, right?
The voice was soft and childlike, but not a child's voice. More like a middle-aged woman playing a kid in an animated show. If you close your eyes, you can see a kid, but it's never totally convincing. Deep down, you know it's something else. Shut the light off, or it'll find you. Doris's advice pinged to the front of my mind. Don't speak to anything out there. That seems simple enough. I didn't know who was out there, but if I ignored them, maybe they would leave me alone. A desperate thought, I know, but I was in the land of desperate moves. 57, I said, my voice shaky.
Hey, I was right,
the voice said.
I'm smart. Are you smart?
I started walking again, hastening my pace. Off to my left, something scampered along the path. They were just beyond my line of sight, but they were there keeping pace with me, no matter how fast I walked.
Are you alone? If you're out here alone, you're probably not smart, even if you can count to 57 like me.
I pulled out the map. I had no way of knowing how close I was to the house, but maybe I'd be able to divine something by looking at the paper. Perhaps one of the trees near me was unique and marked on the map. Hell, maybe it would just come alive and tell me how close I was. Anything was on the table. You're looking for the old man's house, huh? He's dead, you know. Dead, 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 the voice said. Shame. He was nice. He gave me snacks. I called him Snacko. Nearby, a large branch snapped, and that was the breaking point. I started running. It was not the wisest decision, but hearing a cartoonish child's voice tell you that they called your dead grandpa Snacko, followed by a breaking a log off a tree, was enough to get me moving. I tried to stay on the path, but as it twisted toward the house, it became harder to find in the fog. My walking buddy kept pace and hung out in the clouds, walking near me without ever coming into view. Initially, I wanted to get to the house to see what shape it was in and whether there were any other instructions there. Now I wanted to get there to get away from this thing or anything else that might be watching me.
You're going the wrong way. If you want to reach the house, you must stay on the path. The path leads to the house. Follow the path or you'll be in trouble. Trouble, trouble, trouble.
The voice said, chiding me. I know, I snapped. I slapped my hand over my mouth as if that could coax the words back.
You can hear me, huh? I'm Bark. Who are you?
I stopped moving. I needed to recalibrate. Fear was making all my internal systems break down. If I wanted to get through this, I was gonna need my wits about me. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath and released it. My body trembled from the chill in the air and the adrenaline rushing through my veins. Glancing down, I found the trail path was about a foot to my right. I moved back to it and resolved to stay on this route no matter what. I didn't know these woods, and even with a map, I'd be lost if I strayed too far off course.
Uh-oh,
Bark whispered.
It heard you talking. It's coming for you. Do you hear?
I listened to the surrounding wilderness. There wasn't much noise beyond the wind blowing through the trees. Every once in a while, a fat curling red or yellow leaf would float down from the canopy, breaking through the fog like a revelation, and land on the path. Off in the distance, in the thickest wall of the fog, the rattling of some heavy ramshackle creature lumbering through the woods found my ears. It followed no set path. It made its way through the dense woods by simply pushing trees over. Trunks snapped like twigs. They collapsed to the ground with a leg-wobbling thud.
Here it comes,
Bark sang.
You won't make it to Snacko's house in time, stranger. But I can help. Yes, yes, I can hide you.
Ignoring the voice and feeling my stomach churn as the stomping got closer, I pulled out the map in a vain attempt to convince myself I knew what I was doing. There weren't any recognizable landmarks around me. I had no idea how far I had to go. I was lost.
Nagichuwasi strips the flesh off your bones, you know. Every bit of skin comes off and it turns it into jerky.
Bark said in a voice too chipper for the message that it was sharing.
It takes your bones too, adds them to its hut. It's getting closer too.
I swallowed. What can I do? I finally said.
Oh goody, you can hear me. Do you need my help? I need you to say it.
I need your help.
Hooray, I can help you, but you're gonna owe me snacks.
Yeah, sure, whatever. Where are you?
I'm right here,
the voice said. I glanced toward the voice but saw nothing. At first, Bark cleared its throat, and instead of some monstrous, tree-murdering creature, there was a fat, black squirrel looking up at me. He twitched his nose. His whiskers danced. What the hell?
Oh, come, follow me,
the squirrel said before darting off in the opposite direction of the coming catastrophe. I followed. The squirrel's bushy tail was my guide as we got through the fog. We had gone off the path and the ground under us had softened. Mud caked on the outside of my boots, making them heavier with each step. The squish of the soil beneath me grew louder the deeper we sank into the mud. The squirrel stopped mid-mud puddle and turned its twitching face back to me. Roll in this mud. Why? It can smell you, the mud will hide it. Bark said, flopping onto its side and rolling around in the gloopy mess until its fur was thoroughly caked with the stuff. It reached down with its little paws, scooped up some and rubbed it into its face. Hurry, Snacko-2, rub the mud. I gently set the map and urn down in a dry spot near us and then dropped to my knees and rolled in the mud. As I did, I took handfuls of the stuff and covered every inch of my arms and legs. Bark laughed and clapped as I did. He reminded me to get my head and face too. It smells your fear and you stink, Bark said, shaking his little head back and forth. So scared, huh? Just a bit, I managed. He walked over to my flashlight, smelled it before picking it up and hurled it into the fog. What the hell? It can track that too, Snacko-2. He nodded at my mud-covered face. You stink like us now, it won't smell you. Come, follow me. He bolted, drops of mud flung off in his wake, and headed for a nearby fallen tree trunk. Time and insects had hollowed it out. Bark stopped at the opening. He nodded at the tree trunk and disappeared into the hollow's darkness. I stopped at the opening inside. Bark ran back into the moonlight and motioned again at the tree. Come in here. Crawl in or it'll see us. The trunk of the tree was just larger than I was, and it was going to be a snug fit. I dropped to my knees and wriggled my body feet first into the hollow. As I worked my way in, the soft pulp of the tree melted under my boots. After some struggle, I got all the way into the tree, my head just tucked inside. Bark hopped onto my legs and raced up my back. I wanted to scream, but the buzzing in the air around the fallen log scared me into silence. Bark stood on 2 feet and inched up my spine. I felt his little footsteps through my clothes. The buzzing gave way to the loud rattle of something heavy plodding through the nearby woods. As it moved, a cone of silence followed, drowning out all the sounds save for the creaking and cracking of some unseen gigantic creature.
I can't smell your fear, but I know you're afraid. You've been talking with that noisy squirrel, haven't you?
I swallowed hard. Bark took a few cautious steps back toward my legs. The nervous twitch of his bushy tail against my tailbone made me instinctively want to flinch. I knew if I gave in to my natural desires at that moment, this creature would find us both. So I put my lower lip between my teeth and gently bit down, using the pain to keep my brain occupied.
I don't have to tell you that I'll find you. I found you in your dreams already. What I will keep a secret is what I'll do to you when I find you.
The Nagachuasi hissed.
Time is meaningless to me. I can wait forever. Can you?
It started cackling and stomped down with its heavy foot. It made the log jump off the ground. As it crashed back down, the wood splintered and more pulp fell onto my body. I prayed the log hadn't cracked enough to expose our hiding spot. My nerves were shot. My teeth drove into my lip again, and the coppery taste of blood oozed onto my taste buds. The pain was sharp, and it took everything in my body not to yelp.
I've come to collect what's owed.
Goosebumps raced down my body. Bark's twitchy nature only made it worse. He inched toward my ear, using his little hands to grip my lobe, and whispered,
Snacko too. The Nagachuwasi means to hurt you.
I wanted to bat him away and also scream. I know that bark, but the looming presence of a timeless ghoul kept me in check. The ground started shaking again, the soft pulp above me falling into my face, and the Nagachuwasi drifted away, back into the fog, deeper into the woods. I finally let out the breath that I had apparently been holding. Bark crawled over my head until he was standing directly in front of my face, his bushy tail brushing up against my nose. I held back a sneeze as he poked his head out.
It's gone. Come quickly. Snacko's nest is nearby,
he said, skipping away from the log. I inched my way out of the hollow, birthed from a wooden womb, until I finally found myself back outside on all fours. I stood, shook loose the log's placenta, and glanced around for Bark. I didn't find him, but I found dozens of clover footprints all around us, some as large as tires. I swallowed hard.
Snacko too, this way,
came a small voice from the fog. I shook my head. I'm following the directions of a talking squirrel, and headed toward where I'd heard his voice. I might as well lean into this insanity. 5 minutes later, we came upon a small house nestled among peeling birch trees. House was a generous term. This thing was a glorified shack. My grandpa had more money than a Texas oilman and the taste of a French aristocrat. Yet his dream house and his dream location was nothing more than a slightly upgraded ice fishing shanty. Something cobbled together like a Depression-era Hooverville house. I was confused. This is what he wanted me to have. I laughed at the cosmic joke of him leaving me the only place in the world worse than my own ramshackle apartment. Grandpa had jokes. What a guy.
Here is Snacko's palace,
Bark said. Oh, some palace, I muttered.
He keeps the snacks inside. Let's go inside,
he added, darting for the door. I pushed it open to reveal, well, not much. There was an overturned deer skull on top of an ancient cabinet, an oaken barrel repurposed as a chair, and a wire milk crate with a note under a rock. There wasn't even a floor, just well-worn dirt. Dozens of different footprints on it, from man to animal and back again. Even a few that looked protozoic. What the hell?
Snacks in the cabinet,
Bark said, reaching there in 2 jumps. I left the tree rat to jump in front of the cabinet and walk to the note. It was written in my grandfather's hand. It read, "If you've made it to the shack, you've crossed over into the cauldron. You cannot escape without burying my remains now. It won't let you leave. The only way out is through." Great. The note continued, "You'll probably have to give the squirrel a treat. It's wise to do so, as it will be a big help to your mental health. He chatters. Take the skull and fill it with the purified water in the cabin. Mix this with the liquid in the pool of nightmares. Pour the mixture over your head and it will guide you to where you need to bury my remains. If the Nagachuwasi finds you, it will exact its revenge." He ended it there with a vague threat. I crossed to the cabinet and pulled it open. Inside, there were only 2 things. One was a stale oatmeal cookie. The other was a wooden cup filled with foul-smelling water. I dropped the cookie to Bark, who gobbled it down in 6 or 7 bites. He wobbled to the wall and plopped down, his belly fat with cookie bits. I took the cup of stank water and poured it into the deer's hollowed-out skull. The bones were carved with symbols that I had never seen before. I ran my fingers over them, and as I did, they briefly turned red before dimming to black. "We should go," I said. "I don't want to be here forever."
Oh, I am full,
Bark said.
I will nap now, but I'll find you soon. Travel well, Snacko 2.
With that, he covered his face with his tail and dozed off to sleep, and the little rat had the nerve to start snoring. I sighed, placed the skull on the milk crate, and pulled out the map. If I stuck to the path to the north, I would run into the Pool of Nightmares. It didn't sound fun, but nothing about this trip had. I sighed, gathered my things, and left the shack. The fog was cookie batter thick now, and the way it billowed along the path resembled the wriggling of a white snake. The northern patch was easy to find, but the surrounding skies were darker than before. I wasn't sure how long I had been out here, but I hoped the morning sun would soon rise. Until then, I was stuck with whatever the silvery moonlight showed me. I walked in silence this time, no counting. I kept my ears trained for any noise out in the void. The Nagichuasi hadn't left my thoughts since the encounter. I didn't even get a look, but I knew that it was unholy. Not from this world. It was something I had no desire to see. Glancing down at the map, I saw that I was coming up to the pool. I wasn't sure where it would be or how large, but I kept my head on a swivel in case Grandpa's map was inaccurate. A horrible idea came to me then. What if he had been lying to me this whole time? The man's stock in trade was deception. He made his bones through dishonesty. I wasn't even sure if the ashes that I had been schlepping around were his. Maybe he had wanted me to do this to inflict one last horror on a family that he hated, a family that had turned its back on him. Maybe he wanted me dead or worse, needed me dead to be resurrected. 1,000 different scary movie plots flooded the front of my brain. While I was indexing and processing, I didn't notice the creaking from a nearby swaying tree. That changed when it walked onto the path in front of me. It was an oak, mighty and full. It reminded me of the wooden watchman from before. Its sprawling canopy dimmed the already little light from the silvery moon. The roots formed feet that allowed it to walk onto the path. A tree with feet would be freakish enough, but this one had something a little extra for my nightmares. It had a face.
Toi m'arrest.
It asked in a voice so low that it rumbled my bones. I don't have any more treats. It took a step closer, its branches arcing toward my body. From profile, it would look like a man standing under a tree being violently blown to one side by a fierce wind. I stared at its wooden face, focusing on its mouth of jagged wooden teeth. They were the color of red wine with bits of flesh stuck in the gaps.
Toi m'arrest, Boja.
It said, the word still a mystery, but the menace in his voice clear as day. I placed the skull, urn, and map to the side and raised my hands to show that I came in peace. I've come to right a wrong. I mean you no harm.
Pieshi namesake.
The tree said, its mouth forming into an unsettling smile. A single leaf from the canopy ripped away from a branch and gently floated down toward me. I followed it as it softly landed at my feet. It was almost beautiful in a way. Maybe the tree had understood that I didn't mean to harm it. Then the leaf sprouted little arms and legs. It turned to me, red eyes glowing and a mouth of tiny, toothpick-sharp teeth snarling. Instinctively, I stomped and it crunched under me. A pool of sap oozed out from under my boot. I looked up at the tree's bewildered face. We stared at one another before it bellowed, blowing my hair back and sending gobs of rotten flesh onto my face. It headbanged its canopy forward, sending hundreds of leaves tumbling down. As they did, they all sprouted arms and legs and screamed in unison. "Oh shit," I said, stumbling back. As I did, the trees sent a root beneath my foot, causing me to tumble to the ground. I fell back with a brain-scrambling crash that caused my vision to go blurry. I shook my head in time to see hundreds of murderous leaves screaming at me as they gently floated down. There were heavy thumps behind me so loud that the surrounding trees shivered. The water in the deer skull jumped and sloshed around, a tempest in a brain cavity. I turned, fearing the Nagachuasi was coming up behind to grind me into dust, but that wasn't it. I had to rub my eyes to make sure that I wasn't imagining things. It was Bark, now the size of an office building, sprinting toward the furious tree and its screaming leaves.
Gather your things and run for the pool, Snacko 2.
I didn't hesitate. I scrambled to my pile, scooped everything into my arms, and ran down the path, just as the massive squirrel slammed into the walking tree. Bark knocked the tree into the fog. Their tussling, screaming, hissing, and squeaking echoed all around me. Dozens of leaves landed on the ground and advanced toward me, but my boots made quick work of them. The ruins along the skull glowed, dim at first, but as I ran farther away the path, their intensity grew. I let them guide me until at last, they were glowing so brightly that they lit up the area around me like a red halo. Their light reflected off the jet-black pool of water that showed up right in front of me. If the light hadn't been so intense, I would have just stumbled into it. My hands were trembling. In the distance, the sounds of Bark wrestling with the tree and the tiny murderous yells from the fighting leaves filled the night air. The birch house note instructions came back to me, and I dipped the skull into the pool, mixing the two liquids. As the dark black water mixed in, it fizzed and bubbled at first and then went still. Taking that as a sign that the mixture was complete, I raised it over my head and tipped the concoction over me. As soon as the liquid touched my head, I was transported to another place. All the sound around me had disappeared, and when I opened my eyes, it was as if I hadn't opened them at all. Everything was black, darker than I'd ever seen. The dark you imagine in the deepest recesses of space. "Hello?" I called out, but the only response I received was an echo. I started walking, or what I thought was walking. Truthfully, I didn't know if I was moving anywhere. My limbs shuffled, but the scenery never changed. Just as I was wondering what the hell I was going to do, I got the distinct sensation of falling in the pit of my stomach. I blinked and I found myself suddenly outside my apartment, not standing in the courtyard but floating outside my bedroom window, looking in. It was the night before I left for this place, the moments before my vivid nightmare. I tried banging on the window, but my hand made no sound on the pane. I tried to pry it open, but it wouldn't budge. Nothing I did affected anything around me. All I could do was observe. As I turned in my bed, my closet door popped open. It slowly squeaked on its hinges, as if whatever was pushing the door open was testing to see if I would wake up. When I didn't budge, the door opened wider and the moonlight reflected off of a snaking, bone-white limb as it inched along the floor. Red eyes glowed from the crack in the door. I tried banging on the glass, but again no sound. But it caught someone's attention. The monster in the closet turned from my sleeping form to me. We locked eyes, and when it grinned at me, its white teeth shimmered in the darkness. It was the Nagachuasi, and it knew that I was trapped. It reveled in that fact. It kept its eyes on me, a stupid grin plastered to its face, as the arm shimmied up the bed and touched my sleeping foot. A funny thing happened when the Nagachuasi's appendage touched my foot in this vision. I felt it on my actual foot.
I tried to shake off the sensation, but it did nothing to stop it. As the arm extended up my sleeping body, my awake body experienced everything. I tried batting at it with my hands, but it was in my mind, messing with my brain and my body. A total violation that I was powerless to stop. The flopping limb finally reached my shoulder and inched back. The tip grew red and hot like an old car lighter before pressing into my skin. It stung my back and I swatted at the ghost. My skin bubbled. The burning sensation bled into my muscle fibers. Nagachuwasi's limb quickly recoiled back into the closet. As it did, it hissed.
There is nowhere you can go that's safe.
I blinked and found myself in my college linguistics lecture hall. It was packed with students absorbed in a test. I looked down at the paper and didn't have a clue what any of this was. The language was in the same runic symbols on the side of the deer skull. The creeping anxiety of being unprepared rose inside my heart. As I stressed about solving the language, the person next to me hissed. I turned and saw a person entirely made up of wriggling snakes. They hissed again, and then the snakes all said in unison, "Where are your clothes?" I glanced down and realized that I too had a snake out. Shame blanketed me, and I stood up, covering myself with the test paper. More faces turned to me, and in that dreamlike way, some I recognized and some I didn't. Some had faces, some didn't, but they all had disdain for my nude presence.
You don't belong here,
they told me telepathically. Their words strafed my soul, leaving it in tatters.
Nobody wants you here.
The snake man dissolved, and the hundreds of snakes slithered throughout the room. I spied the exit and I sprinted for it. As soon as I pushed open the door, I found myself standing in a darkened hallway. I was dressed again, this time in a jumper with the Care Bears on the front. The hallway came back to me as well. This was my grandpa's old house. I was still a child the last time that we had been there, and apparently a huge fan of the Care Bears. But this hallway stood out because it always bothered me. Unease always found me when I stepped foot on that runner. It was one of those childhood fears that take root when your brain is still wet mud, before rationality blossoms, sensation over reason, instinctual fear, the way a gazelle knows to run from a lion. I toddled down the hall trying to speak, but it only came out as gibberish. My parents were fighting with my grandpa in the other room. Their words were foreign to my ears, but their tone was apparent. I moved further away from their bombast. Someone called my name from the shadows, soft and pleasant.
Hey boy, come and let me show you something.
I glanced back toward where the fighting was happening, their voices raised and full of venom. It's not somewhere that I wanted to be. The voice sensed my hesitation.
They aren't even paying attention to you. I will. Follow me, boy. Let's have fun.
A hesitant step forward. The fibers of the hallway runner tickled my feet as I took a step toward the shadows, toward that sweet voice. But something in my gut swirled. My legs grew heavy and I found myself unable to move them any longer. The voice sensed this too.
Oh, don't be a fool like your parents. They only want to scold you. Come, boy, let me show you the unseen wonders of this world and the next and the next.
No, I say, the baby babble falling by the wayside. No, 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 no.
I have candy, gifts, happiness lies near me. Just walk over, I'm friendly. I'll wave hello,
they said. From the dark of the room, a stark white hand emerged and tried to coax me over. Its fingers impossibly long and tapered to knife points.
Oh, come, boy, let us play together.
No, I said again, taking a step back.
I'm going to have to eat you then,
the voice said. As the words escaped its lips, piercing red eyes and a new moon-white smile formed in the shadows. The Nagachuwasi.
And give me what is mine, boy.
On unsteady toddler legs, I turned, nearly wobbling to the ground, and ran away from the dark. If the Nagachuwasi followed, I couldn't tell and didn't glance back to see. I ran towards the heated words in the other room. I reached the end of the hallway and finally glanced back. Spindly legs, long and narrow like a spider but made from hundreds of human bones, inched out from the shadows. A second pair of hands came next. But unlike the knife points, these fingers haven't collected enough bones yet. The fleshy skin flopped around like a tomato plant tendril, looking for something to attach itself to. That awful smile never going away. Tears welled up in my eyes. My hands balled into fists. My stomach acid a churning sea whipped up by an approaching hurricane. I wanted to go, but my legs were stuck in neutral.
I am timeless, boy. I'll find you soon enough.
No, I say, finally feeling my foot lift from the ground. I turned away from the monster and quickly rounded the corner into utter and total darkness. The forest floor rose quickly and I hit it full force with my chest. All the air shot out of me like a deflating balloon. I rolled onto my back and sucked in for air. It felt impossible at first, but gradually it found my lungs, and the painful spasms ceased. Calm washed over me and I laughed.
Miss Snacko 2, are you okay?
Bark, now regular bark-sized, stood on my stomach and stared at me with concern. I never thought I'd be happy to see a squirrel, but here I was, wishing I could shrink down and hug this little guy with all my might. You saved me, I said. Why?
Bark helps those who give him snacks.
What happened to the tree guy? Bark pulled out an acorn and gnawed at it.
He will not be a problem, nor will his delicious children,
he said, finishing his most recent snack. But how did you get so big? And Bark shrugged.
Oh, the moment called for it.
But that's impossible, I said, realizing that I was currently talking to a squirrel. Impossibility in this place had a high bar to clear, and yet we seemed to be pole vaulting over it with reckless abandon, Olympic-level leaps.
When Bark needed to be brave, Bark was brave,
he said. Why didn't you do that when the Nagachuwasi trapped us inside a hollow log?
That wasn't the time to be brave.
I shooed him off my belly and stood. My body ached and I wanted nothing more than to pull a bark and curl up and sleep. The pool of nightmares was gone. Now it was just a thin layer of slick mud with tiny squirrel footprints in it. According to the map, the Nagachuwasi's hut wasn't far, maybe 30 yards or so. The knot in my stomach told me that it would be around here too. The skull that I had brought with me was gone. All that remained was my grandpa's urn. If I buried it outside the hut, I'd be done with all this madness.
We're nearly there,
Bark said.
It's along the path, but I cannot come with you.
Why?
It is not my journey, Snacko 2,
he said as scampering up a nearby tree, nearly lost in the surrounding fog.
Go, before the Nagachuwasi hears us talking,
he added before disappearing into the canopy of the tree. The world went silent. Come on, I said, stooping to pick up the urn. You're more trouble than you're worth, Gramps. I tucked it under my arm and followed along the path. The only way out was through. I needed to finish this. If I didn't, Doris and her rowdy gang of gun-touting townies would have a few choice words for me. Namely, any last requests. I wasn't sure what awaited me ahead. I had already gone through enough in the service of a man who hated my guts. Not just mine, but his own kids' guts. Hell, the nearby town's guts, the world's guts. A man so filled with hate and disdain for anyone that wasn't himself that he died doing something that he had been warned against. Instead of listening to anyone's warnings to stop, he pushed forward. How do you get there as a person? How do you stop someone from doing that? In front of me, the rumble of heavy plodding broke the silence of the world. The fog kept me from getting a glimpse. I took that as a win. As it moved, old growth branches cracked and snapped like twigs. Whatever this thing was, it moved at a steady, if slow, pace. I kept up my track. If the Nagachuasi was going to come for me now, I had nowhere to hide. I had no friends or rodents to aid me in defeating it. I'd have to do this alone. That made me shiver. I had no magical abilities. I couldn't eat a stale cookie and become the Hulk. What chance did I have against this thing? The plodding stopped about 10 feet from me. Ahead in the fog, the faintest yellow light glowed. An unmoving lantern suspended 15 feet in the air. Something strange, well, stranger happened. The fog in front of me lifted. I had a clear line of sight to the glowing hut. My jaw went slack. It was Nagachuasi's hut. An earthen hovel constructed of dirt, fallen logs, moss, and dead leaves. 4 hairy, stem-like legs held it aloft, each ending in a cloven hoof. The leg was a patchy mix of black, brown, and white fur. In the sections where the skin had ripped away, the straining muscles and bones were visible. The lantern hung from one of the 2 front-facing windows. The door was made of dried, stretched human skin, where their faces had been, creating a demented polka dot look. I've come to bury these ashes, my grandpa's ashes. I think you knew him well. In the window opposite the lantern, a pair of glowing red eyes emerged. I was being watched, though examined was more apt. The Nagachuasi didn't speak a word, it didn't move, didn't do any of the things I expected it to do. I have nothing to do with any wrong that he may have caused you. We weren't close. I just want to put an end to this.
There is no end to this cycle.
The Nagachuasi hissed from the window.
I am timeless.
I have nothing to do with you. The eyes at the window disappeared. Immediately, the sensation of hot breath on my neck made me shiver. The Nagachuasi was behind me.
I have everything to do with you,
it hissed. At once, its tendrils pressed into my skin, searching for something to latch onto. My skin burned from their touch.
This moment has been coming for a long time. Your grandpa brought it upon your lineage. Now the poison seeps into you.
My body seized. A tear fell down my cheek. My heart raced and blood whooshed in my ears. My legs neared a catastrophic collapse. And then I heard a squeak on the wind. An alarm. No, a call to action. Something stirred deep within me. No, I said, my voice soft. No, it doesn't. I took a step away from the Nagachuasi. It was still attached, but its grasp slipped somewhat. Bolder and louder, I said, No, it doesn't. I've come here to bury my grandpa's ashes, to end this.
Oh, how brave our little boy has gotten. But how brave are you really?
Another step and I was free of its clutches. I dropped to the ground, pressed my hands into the soft dirt and started digging. I am here to bury my grandpa's ashes as you demanded and leave this all behind me. The Nagachuasi shoved me, causing me to fall forward and knock the top off the urn. Grandpa's ashes spilled out and mingled with the dirt. I turned to see the creature, but it was gone. A familiar voice called out to me, one I hadn't heard for years. Grandpa. I turned and the man loomed over me, but he wasn't made of flesh and blood, no. He had been reconstructed from the spilled ashes of the now empty urn.
The reason I hated your father and your mother was because of you, he said. I hated you from the moment you slithered out of your mother's diseased hole. I hated the moment you first laid eyes on me with your childish cooing and foolish brain. I hated you because you were weak and unworthy of my wealth, of my name. You were a mistake, nothing more than an untended wound left to fester. A dullard, a boring fool. You were born nothing, have become nothing, and will die with nothing. You are my greatest shame and the reason that I sought to escape in the arms of the Nagachuwasi. You are the reason for your imminent demise, boy. You're a failure in every sense of the word.
I lowered my gaze. I didn't see his face, but his smug smile was imprinted on my mind. The Nagachuwasi had tried threats, it tried horror, it tried violence. Now it was trying shame. Like an overly cocky fighter finally finding an opponent's weak spot, it hammered away waiting to deliver its knockout punch. But I knew how to take a punch, and I found the strength to throw my own. No, I said firmly, my eyes meeting his. The only failure that I see is the husk of a sad, lonely old man so desperate for connection that he sought refuge with another monster. But monsters don't play fair. The Nagachuwasi saw through you, used you, and now wants to use me too. But I won't let it. I've come to bury you, and that's what I intend to do. I kicked the urn into the little hole that I had dug and dropped to my knees. As I shoveled handfuls of dirt over the brass, the ashes puffed away, and the Nagachuwasi appeared in its place. It shot out its arms, wrapped them around mine, but I kept shoveling dirt onto the pile.
I am timeless. You cannot escape me.
It screamed as it pulled me closer to its open arms. I wrenched myself free and kicked a clump of dirt at the urn. It sailed through the air and landed on top of the brass, covering it completely. Grandpa was buried, finally. The grip on my arms loosened. The Nagachuwasi was gone. The weight that came off my body nearly made me take flight. I was free of it, of him, of the cycle forever. I stood, caught my breath as the tears began welling in my eyes. I laughed to stop the sobs, but they came anyway. I let them, welcomed them. This wasn't sadness, this was joy. A joy so deep the devil himself would have a hard time not smiling. After I caught my breath, I sighed. I'm never coming back here again. I pulled the map out of my pocket. A fresh path had been created. It led to the front door of the Nagachuwasi's hut. What had once been a dead end was now my exit. I lowered the map and watched as the house took 5 rumbling steps toward me before settling down to the forest floor. The front door creaked open. I kept waiting for the Nagachuwasi to come walking out, taking revenge on me, but nobody came out. It wanted me to go in, so I went. You know you have a squirrel sunbathing on your rocking chair, the friendly UPS driver said, handing over a package. I ain't never seen one sleep with people around. I glanced out to find a black squirrel sprawled out in a ray of sunlight that lashed across my porch and smiled. Oh, he just ate, I said. He always naps after. The UPS driver laughed. That's the life, huh? Fat and happy. I'll take happy. The squirrel can keep fat. The driver laughed. You have a good one, he said, before turning to the squirrel and nodding. You too, big guy. I smiled and wished him well. I glanced over at the newest resident in my apartment building's courtyard oak tree and shook my head. Imagine how shocked he'd be if he heard you speak. I saw the job listing 2 weeks ago. Wanted, night guard at West Market in Redacted, Pennsylvania. 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. shift. $21 an hour. The whole thing struck me as odd right off the bat. What kind of grocery store needed a security guard while it was closed? Was the crime really that bad? but I needed the money badly. And 2 days later, after a phone interview with a man named Clive, I showed up for my first shift. As soon as I pulled up, I sort of understood why they needed a night guard. The grocery store sat at the edge of a rundown strip mall. Large signs reading "Space for Rent" hung in the store windows, but judging by the dusty glass and flickering street lamps, nobody had taken them up on that offer in years. I parked near the front door, and as I approached the building, I saw a woman hurrying away from the store. "You must be Aaron," she said breathlessly. "The night guard." "Yeah, that's me. Clive left you some instructions. I put them on the conveyor belt at Register 1. She gave me a polite nod and then stepped around me, heading for the only other car in the parking lot. "Oh, thanks. Be friendly," my inner voice scolded. "She's your new coworker." I turned around. "Hey, what's your name?" But she was already diving into the car. The door slammed, the car reeled out of the parking space, and then she was gone. So much for a new friend. I turned back towards the store. The parking lot was completely empty now, and the nearest street light was flickering with an odd, erratic rhythm. A cold wind swept in, whipping a crumpled paper bag across the parking lot. Well, here goes nothing. I stepped up to the store. The glass doors squeaked as they parted for me, and then I stepped inside. Despite its outward appearance, the store was actually pretty nice inside. Bright fluorescent lights shone from overhead. Jazzy music played from hidden speakers. I headed over to Register 1, where a folded piece of paper was waiting for me. I flipped it open and began to read. "Dear Aaron, welcome to the West family. We sincerely hope that you enjoy your first shift. To help you, we've compiled a list of rules that should make your shift as easy as our fresh-baked apple pie. Rule number 1. As night guard, you are expected to patrol the store every half hour, making sure that nothing is amiss. You may spend the rest of your time in the break room at the back of the store, monitoring the security camera feeds. Rule number 2. Do not go down aisle number 7. Do not look down aisle number 7. Rule number 3. If you hear a knocking sound coming from within the freezers in the frozen food aisle, ignore it. Rule number 4. If you see a shopping cart that hasn't been put away, please return it to the shopping carts at the front of the store immediately. Rule number 5. Do not be alarmed if you find a pool of blood in the meat aisle. Sometimes our meat packages leak. Simply head to the storage closet, get the mop and bucket, and clean it up. However, do not step in the puddle or touch it in any way. Rule number 6. If you see a woman in the store, immediately go to the break room and stay there until she leaves. Do not call the police or report a break-in. Do not make eye contact with her. Rule number 7. The music we play throughout the store is a pre-recorded disc of instrumental jazz. If the music ever stops, immediately go to the break room and stay there until it resumes. Rule number 8. Do not, under any circumstances, end your shift early. Thank you so much, and again, I hope you enjoy your shift. Clive. I stared at the rules, rereading them slowly. They were so weird. A woman in the store. Avoid aisle 7. I had never been given instructions like this, even when I worked as a bouncer at a nightclub in a bad part of town. Maybe it was a test. They wanted to see how well I could follow instructions, no matter how absurd they were. I looked up at the security camera, staring down at me from the corner. Okay, challenge accepted. I glanced at my phone. 12:06. I might as well get my first patrol out of the way now, before getting settled in. It was odd walking through the store when it was so empty and quiet. All the breads and muffins had been stored away somewhere. White opaque plastic had been pulled down over the vegetable display to keep the cold in. When I got to the end, I made a right into the meat section. Sheets of plastic had been pulled over the meat coolers too. I saw flashes of red through the gaps, of massive ribeye and sirloin steaks, big slabs of meat with the bones still intact. I averted my eyes. While I wasn't a vegetarian, I never really liked the sight of raw meat. I turned instead to the aisles. Aisle number 3, pasta and sauces, all lined up on the shelves, glinting in the fluorescent light. Aisle number 4, cookies and snacks. Aisle 5, aisle 6. Oh, right, I wasn't supposed to look at aisle 7. I forced myself to look down at the floor. Yeah, it was stupid, but they told me not to look. In the off chance they were going to check the CCTV footage later to grade my performance, I was going to follow every rule. I continued further into the store. A few minutes later, I found the break room, a nondescript brown door with a little square window cut into it. I took note of its location for later. As soon as I was done with this patrol, I was going to break out my laptop and finish watching Friday the 13th 4. And then I was at the west end of the store, the frozen section. I turned down the aisle, heading back towards the front. And that's when I saw it. A shopping cart parked askew in the middle of the aisle. I huffed. Of all the rules, this was the one that annoyed me the most. I was hired to be a security guard and not a cleanup crew. Wasn't it the employee's job to put all the carts away at closing time? Sighing, I began pushing it towards the front of the store. The wheels rolled smoothly underneath me. The jazz music played softly in my ears. I turned the corner and walked past the cash registers, heading towards the front door. And that's when I heard it. A soft sound, barely audible over the jazz music. I stopped, straining my ears to listen. Several seconds of silence went by, and then I heard it again. It sounded like somebody crying. The hairs on my neck stood on end. There's no one in here. The door has been locked the whole time. Unless a customer has accidentally stayed past closing time. Maybe that employee, the woman that I had run into in the parking lot, didn't notice them and locked up before they could get out. "Who's there?" I called out. A wailing sob in response. My heart plummeted. It sounded like a woman or possibly even a child. "I'm coming," I called, breaking into a run. "Where are you?" They didn't reply, they just continued sobbing. I frantically headed in the direction of the sound, calling out to them, telling them that everything would be okay. But then I stopped dead. The sound, it was coming from aisle 7. Do not go down aisle 7. Do not look down aisle 7. The rules had been very clear about that. I stopped just short of the aisle and next to an end cap display of mayonnaise and carefully positioned myself so that I was hidden. "I'm going to help you. Can you tell me what happened?" I called out. They finally spoke, but they didn't answer my question. "Help me," the voice cried through more sobs. "Please." I wanted to step into the aisle. My foot was already halfway off the floor, ready to run in there and comfort them. But something stopped me. A gut instinct, a little alarm bell going off in my head. Because out of all the aisles, what were the chances this person would be in aisle 7? And besides, they were safe. They were in an empty store with me. It's not like they were in a dark alleyway in the middle of the night. "Come out of the aisle," I called, my voice shaking a little. "Then I'll be able to help you." "Please, help me," the voice replied. This is stupid. Clearly some person got stuck in here after closing time and they're scared. Just go into the aisle and help them get home. But there was another part of my brain, the instinctual lizard brain part, and it was screaming at me to not move a muscle. "Do you need me to call someone? Your parents or family, the police maybe?" "Help me," the voice pleaded again. The help me, it sounded the same each time they said it. A little stutter at the beginning, an emphasis on me. It almost sounded like a recording or some AI-generated thing looping over and over. It didn't sound natural. "Come out of the aisle. Come out and I'll help you," I shouted. The sobs got louder and faster, hysterical. "Help me!" The voice pleaded again in a desperate tone that made my stomach twist. I stood there pressed against the mayonnaise display. Listening to them sob was making my stomach flip-flop, even if it did sound slightly unnatural. I could call the police, I thought. They would know what to do. Except I had left my cell phone with my backpack at cash register 1, and getting it would mean crossing aisle 7. The rules didn't say anything about walking past aisle 7. They just said that I shouldn't go down it or look down it, and I couldn't just stand here and do nothing. What if it really was someone who needed help? A child who had sprained their ankle and couldn't get up. "Don't worry, I'm getting my phone and calling the police," I called out. And then I took a deep breath and stepped across the threshold of aisle 7, towards register 1. As soon as I took a step, the crying stopped. Just like that. Violent sobbing, and then, in an instant, nothing. Like a switch had been flipped. And then the footsteps started. Loud, slapping footsteps of somebody running down the aisle, way too large to be a child, coming straight at me. My heart dropped. It's a trap. They're coming for me and I'm probably going to die here. But as soon as I made it across the aisle, the sound stopped. All I heard were the soft jazz tunes playing through the speakers overhead. I hightailed it to the break room, completely forgetting about the cart that I was supposed to return. The break room was small and cramped. The little square window in the door had been blacked out with construction paper from the inside. The only source of light came from the computer screen on the desk, displaying the security camera feeds. I scrolled through the feeds. I quickly noticed that none of them offered coverage of aisle 7. It seemed like the cameras were intentionally placed to avoid that aisle. After searching the grainy black and white video for anything amiss, I leaned back in the chair and I closed my eyes. When I finally opened them again, it was almost 12:30. Time for my next patrol. I didn't want to go. I felt safe here, locked up in this little room, but I also knew that I wouldn't be safe if I didn't listen to the rules. I shuddered, imagining what would have happened to me if I had gone down aisle 7, if I hadn't listened. I pulled myself out of the seat and headed for the door. The store was completely silent, no hysterical sobbing or pounding footsteps. I started my patrol near the back, walking up aisle 17. Cans of food glinted on the shelves as I passed, but when I glanced at them, I didn't see any labels that I recognized. No chef ravioli or giant green men, just generically labeled cans of meat stew. In fact, all the aisle had was meat stew, the same cans over and over and over. I reached the end and turned right towards the front of the store, and that's when I realized that I had already broken one of the rules. The cart. I hadn't returned it. It wasn't where I had left it. Instead of haphazardly parked near aisle 7, it sat next to one of the cash registers, like some ghost man was checking out his groceries. I paused for a second, hands hovering above the handle, and then I grabbed it and headed towards the door. Outside, the parking lot was pitch black, not a single street lamp. The shopping carts are only a few feet from the door, I told myself. Just go in and out, it'll take 2 seconds. I did it as quickly as possible. I ran into the darkness, slammed the shopping cart into the row and dashed back inside. And then I shut the doors and clicked the lock. Okay, that wasn't too bad, I said to myself, letting out a sigh of relief. For a second, I reveled in the peace of the store, the silence, the safety of being locked inside, with no one else with me. But then I stopped. The silence,
Oh no,
The jazz music wasn't playing. How long had it been off for? I had been so preoccupied with returning the cart that I wasn't even paying attention. I broke into a sprint towards the back of the store, cookies and snacks flashing by me, and then I swerved right and sprinted into the break room. I pulled out the list of rules and read them over again. Do not, under any circumstances, end your shift early. Why did he write that? Was it just because he didn't want anybody flaking out on him? Or if I left early, would some horrible fate befall me? Because I really, really wanted to leave. I opened my backpack and pulled out the soda that I had brought, and I popped it open, took a sip, and scrolled through the security feed. 5 more hours. The next 4 patrols went fairly well. The rules didn't say how long they had to be, so every 30 minutes I sprinted a lap around the store as quickly as I could. The whole thing only took about a minute, and then for the other 29, I locked myself in that break room. On the second patrol, I heard knocking as I ran down the freezer aisle. It started as light tapping across the glass and then crescendoed into loud thumps, like somebody was slamming their palms against the glass doors. As per the rules, I ignored it. I just kept running until I made it back to the break room. On the last patrol, the music had cut out again, so I quickly detoured and got to the break room as quickly as I could, the silence ringing in my ears. And now, here I was in the break room with 3 hours left. I stared at the clock on my phone, ticking slowly towards 3 a.m. I stood up, shaking out my nervous energy, preparing myself to sprint. I had been a runner back in high school, but in the past 10 years, I had gotten way out of shape. The last patrol had left me panting and breathless, with my legs aching. My hand closed around the doorknob, my heart hammered in my chest. 3, 2, 1, go. I wrenched the door open and shot out into the store. But I didn't get very far, because there was an enormous pool of blood on the floor. I froze. All the air sucked out of my lungs, and I stared at the blood shining in the fluorescent lights. The rules said to clean it up, but that would take at least 10 minutes. I wasn't safe out here. I swallowed, and then I hurried to the supply closet. I got a mop and a bucket, and I started cleaning as fast as I could. The job was messy. I slid the mop through the blood and then dunked it in the bucket, rinsed and repeated. The soapy water tinged red. A few times it splashed up and almost landed on me. But I did it. I cleaned it all up without touching a drop. Unfortunately, by the time that I was finished, it was 3:27. Time for my next patrol. I was too tired to run, and so I settled for a brisk walk around the store. I headed up through the frozen food. I noticed now that there were handprints on the glass doors, handprints of all sizes, tilted and smudged. Except the proportions looked all wrong, with fingers that were too long and too thin. I averted my eyes and kept going. 2.5 more hours. My footsteps clicked against the tile floor. The jazz was starting to grate on my nerves. I must have heard the same looping saxophone melody 20 times now. It made me want to punch something. Sighing, I continued towards the produce section, briskly walking past the aisles. And then I stopped. Something caught my eye in one of the aisles. I backed up and took a better look. Someone was standing in aisle 9. A woman. She wore a blue linen dress and black high heels. Long black hair cascaded down her back almost to her waist. She faced away from me, standing still, her thin white arms hanging limply at her sides. In her hand was a basket filled with cuts of raw meat. The rule echoed in my head. If you see a woman in the store, immediately go to the break room. Do not make eye contact with her. I slowly backed up as quietly as I possibly could, and then I started down the next aisle towards the break room. Clicking. I heard her footsteps echo against the tile. I hurried my pace towards the break room, but then I stopped. Her footsteps weren't coming from behind me, they were coming from in front of me. I averted my eyes to the floor, just as I saw two black high-heeled shoes step into the aisle. I stared at the floor. "Do not make eye contact with her. Do not make eye contact with her." The words repeated over and over in my head, but I had to get to the break room and she was standing in my way. All I could see were her shiny, high-heeled shoes, and the little drops of blood that leaked out of the meat packages in her basket, staining the floor. I backed up. That was the only way that I could go. I kept my eyes on the floor, careful not to look up, but she was following me. Click, click. For every step that I took, I saw a shiny black heel come into view, attached to a thin white calf extended, keeping time with me. I quickened my pace and so did she. Click, click, click. I wheeled around and broke into a sprint. Click, click, click. I ran down an aisle at random and sprinted towards the break room, but then halfway down the aisle I stopped. A shopping cart was parked across the middle of the aisle, blocking my path. And not just one cart. Several of them stacked up in a teetering tower that was nearly as tall as the aisles themselves. I was trapped. I backed away, my heart pounding. Click. Slow, methodical footsteps, coming towards me slowly, like a cat stalking its prey. I took my chances. I turned around, sprinted back out into the open, and I stepped into the next aisle. Oh no, no. And I knew it instantly. A tattered lump of gray clothing and sickly pale blue skin sat on the floor. The person, the creature, the thing folded in on itself, in a pose reminiscent of a crying child. But it obviously wasn't anything resembling a human, with its strange lumps and appendages and complete lack of head. I had stepped into aisle 7. I immediately reversed direction, but not before the thing unfolded itself and began to move towards me. I whipped around and, screaming, I sprinted down the next aisle. Miraculously, I made it to the end in one piece. I veered sharply left, towards the break room. Almost there, I'm almost there. My hand hit the doorknob. I wrenched it open and dove inside, and then I collapsed in the chair, panting. I sucked in a breath, staring at the locked door. Am I really safe in here? Technically, the rules never said that I would be safe. Maybe staying in here only decreased my chance of death. I turned my attention to the security camera feed on the monitor. It showed the middle of the store, and from what I could see, the aisles were empty, no trace of the woman. I switched over to the next feed, the produce section. Empty. I switched to the next one. I jumped. She was standing right there, right in front of the break room door. She stood so still that the image could have been a photograph, except for the blood slowly dripping from the meat in her basket. I swallowed and glanced away from the monitor, at the door. My heart slammed into my ribs when I saw her shadow under the door. Go away, please, just go away, I pleaded in my mind. The shadow of her head in the window tilted, as if contemplating her next move. Now I knew why the window had been covered. I forced my eyes away and I looked back at the screen. She was still standing there, except there was something different about the way she was standing. I squinted at the grainy black and white image, trying to figure out what was going on. When my eyes finally fell on her heels, I realized they were facing forward. but I was still looking at the back of her head, at the long black hair cascading to her waist. Either her hair was hanging over her face, or she had turned her head all the way around. It must have been 20 minutes before she began to walk away from the door. I couldn't tell if it was just the low frame rate of these crummy cameras, but her movements looked jerky, her body lurching with each step. It made me sick to watch. When she disappeared from the screen, I let out a breath of relief. My hands and legs were shaking, weak. Okay, think. The rules said to wait until she left. All I had to do was watch the feed by the front door. As soon as I saw her leave the store, I would be safe. After a few minutes of sitting there, waiting for my heart rate to return back to normal, I forced my fingers back to the keyboard. I pressed the arrow key to move to the next feed, and then the next and the next, looking for the camera at the front of the store. No. Her face filled the entire screen. Her eyes filled me with horror. They were pure white, no pupils, no irises, just pure white eyes threaded with spidery veins. I screamed and jumped back, and then I shut my eyes. The rules said don't make eye contact. Did that count though, through the screen? I let out a terrified, shuddering wail and covered my face with my hands, my entire body shaking. When I finally took a peek through my fingers, I saw her, rapidly scaling down the wall, away from the camera on the ceiling like some kind of spider, and then she pushed through the glass doors and disappeared into the night. She had left. I was safe, or as safe as I could be, in this cursed grocery store. I glanced at the clock. 3:58 a.m. Time to patrol. I really didn't want to, but I forced myself to swing the door open and run as fast as I could through the store. I saw shopping carts stacked in teetering towers, heard hands pounding against the freezer doors, saw little spots of blood on the shiny tile from the woman as she had stalked me. And then, a minute later, I was done. I locked myself in that break room, and for the first time in years, I began to sob. The remaining patrols went by without incident, though I did hear more sobbing coming from aisle 7 and more banging from the freezers. And then finally, the hour had come, 6 a.m. My heart soared at the sight of the pink dawn sky through the glass doors. I was safe. I was free. When I glanced out into the parking lot, I saw a few cars pulling in. Disgruntled, groggy employees clutching coffee, heading towards me. As soon as the first one came in, I flew out of the store, ran to my car, and got out of there as fast as I could. I had never felt such relief, such happiness. I felt like a new man. All of my problems, even my financial ones, seemed dwarfed by what I had just gone through. When I pulled onto the main road, I rolled down my windows and flicked on the radio. But it wasn't my usual classic rock station that blared through the speakers. Instead, I heard the upbeat tune of a saxophone. And as I listened to that horrible looping melody, I realized that my days as a night guard for West Market may not be over yet. Goodbye, sweetie. Behave yourself. Mom shouted, waving out of the passenger side window as the car peeled away. I flipped her the middle finger. I had seen the eager glint in her eyes in the week leading up to this. I could hear the chipper tone in her voice. I'm not stupid. They were glad to get rid of me. I turned to find myself standing at the gate of my new school, its Gothic architecture looming before me like a specter. Shadow Grove Academy was known for two things: its strict discipline and its off-putting appearance. The rumors about the place were true. The school resembled something out of a horror movie. Black clouds swirled overhead and the entire campus reeked of despair. I sighed. With no other choice, I heaved my bags up to the main building. I found my way to the principal's office, cursing my parents all the while. Mom and my stepfather Steve could be some real crap stains sometimes, but this was a new low. Once I had reached the principal's office, out of breath and sticky with sweat, I knocked on the door. I stood back, awaiting a response. I could hear shuffling, followed by what sounded like heavy breathing right on the other side. I suddenly felt very uneasy. Hello. I'm Jordan, the new transfer student. The breathing abruptly stopped, but still the door remained shut. Instead of a greeting, 3 papers zipped underneath it. I hesitantly picked them up, noting the tremor in my hands. Reading those pages did nothing to slow my pounding heart. The first was my class schedule. The second was a map of the school with a sloppily drawn star over the boys' dormitory, along with my room number and my roommate's name. The third was a list of rules for Shadow Grove Academy. I skimmed through them. Most were your run-of-the-mill guidelines. Always arrive to class on time, don't stay out past curfew, yada yada. But when I reached the last one, I froze. If the lights shut off while you're seated in the cafeteria, hide immediately. I had read it a second time just to make sure that I wasn't going crazy. The school was already giving me a bad vibe. First the weird behavior from the principal, and now this. How much stranger could my first day possibly get? After what felt like an eternity, I finally reached my destination. I had noticed a handful of students milling about, but none of them seemed too eager to lend me a hand. I couldn't say that I blamed them. I've got a terminal case of RBF. The boys' dorms were even more dreary than I had expected. A general sense of gloom permeated the atmosphere. The entire campus was bathed in it, but this building was particularly dismal. I didn't like it one bit. I finally managed to locate my room down a hallway with dim, flickering lights. For as high as tuition was, the least those cheapskates could have been able to afford was some proper lighting. But it was obvious that they either didn't have the funds or they didn't care. I was leaning towards the latter. I tried to focus on the positives, few and far between as they were, as I knocked on the door to my room. I was expecting a dour, gloom-looking boy with sunken eyes and a permanent frown to answer. RJ was definitely not that. The door swung open, revealing a short boy with a curly brown mop of hair and a devilish grin. His eyes lit up the second that he saw me. "You must be the new guy. My name's RJ," he said, offering a handshake. I accepted, and he gripped my hand with a ferocity that shouldn't have been possible for someone his size. "Jordan, nice to meet you," I said, finally breaking free of his iron grip. I surveyed the room and found that 2 additional sets of eyes were staring me down. A lanky boy sporting a disheveled uniform sat atop what I assumed to be my bed, while a girl wearing too much eyeshadow stood near the window. She was nursing a cigarette, letting the smoke waft out of the opened pane. "Let's get going, Danny. We can come back after Jordan's settled in," the girl said. She put her cigarette out on the bottom of the windowsill, tossed the smoldering butt into the bushes, and shut the window before proceeding to the door with who I presumed to be Danny. "Nice to meet you, new kid. We'll catch you later," he said, slapping me on the shoulder before following the girl out the door. They seem nice. Are they friends of yours? Yeah, Danny and Clara. Don't worry, she'll warm up to you. She's a little shy, RJ said, leaning against his bedpost. Yeah, she seems like a real peach. RJ's focus shifted to my bags. Dang, you lug that here all by yourself. Could ask the janitor to borrow a dolly. The school's got plenty. Well, that would have been nice to know before I dragged this crap halfway across campus. And while we're on the topic, what is this place? Everybody walks around like a lobotomized zombie. The inside of these buildings look like they haven't been maintained since 1952. And on top of that, when I went to the principal's office, she just stood on the other side of the door, breathing like a psychopath. Yeah, this school is completely messed up. The grin on RJ's face didn't falter. Yeah, that's Shadow Grove Academy for ya. And give it a week, Principal Sharpley's halitosis will be tame compared to the stuff you'll see on this campus. I sighed. Something tells me this is gonna be a long school year. The next day, I found myself sitting at a lunch table with my new group of friends. All of us had miraculously managed to get assigned to the same lunch period. I was glad for that. Without them, I would have to sit by myself. Once I took my seat by RJ, I noticed something strange. Everybody was wolfing down their food. Danny shoveled refried beans into his mouth, while RJ and Clara couldn't seem to get enough of their dry cafeteria burgers. Guys, you know nobody's gonna take your food from you, right? They stopped eating for a moment before going right back to cramming food into their mouths, like it was the first meal that they had had in years. Only Danny paused to give me an explanation. He released an exasperated sigh before lowering his plastic spoon from his mouth. Okay, here's the deal. This is gonna sound insane, but you gotta believe me. Every day, the lunch lady has us participate in this game. One of the 4 lunch periods gets randomly selected to participate. We don't know which one has to play until around 10 minutes into lunch. When all the lights shut off, that means it's our turn. If you don't get to eat before it starts, you're gonna have to go hungry for the rest of the day. And trust me, for this game, you'll need all the energy that you can get. My brows furrowed. Okay, I said, slowly peeling my tangerine. I'm scared to ask, but what kind of game are we talking about? Danny looked me directly in the eyes. I wanted to dismiss this entire thing as one big joke, but his cold stare told me that this was real. Hide and seek. I know it sounds stupid, but the thing is, no one knows what happens to the kids who lose. I don't think I've ever even met anybody who's lost the game. But then again, look around you. There's over 1,000 kids at this school, and there's close to 250 in here right now. I mean, that has to be some pretty low odds, right? 1 in 5. Danny stared at me blankly. What? 1 in 5. That's your odds of losing. You said this game is played every day, and we go to school for about 180 days of the year. Divide that by 1,000 and you get your odds of losing. Somewhere between 1 in 5 and 1 in 6. Nerd. Danny mumbled under his breath. Anyway, if the lights do happen to go off, run and find your best hiding spot. If you think I'm lying, look around. Have you ever seen a room with so many doors? And Danny was right. The cafeteria was expansive, but even so, it seemed like a stretch to need 12 different exits. Something wasn't adding up. The remainder of the day passed in a blur. I couldn't seem to shake Danny's revelation from my head. Incredulous as it was, I believed every word. Nobody would go that far just to play a dumb prank on the new guy. The syllabus was proof of that. I had no other option but to bide my time and play the game for myself. I was back in the cafeteria before I knew it, watching my friends eat like maniacs. Geez, you guys really take this seriously, I said, watching RJ inhale a bologna sandwich so fast that he nearly threw it back up. "Yeah," he said, choking back tears. "You will too after you get a glimpse of that lunch lady." And that's when it happened. As if on cue, the room was plunged into darkness. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust, but the second they did, I saw it. A massive digital clock at the end of the room. 5 minutes had been set in angry red numbers. I watched as the time began to melt away. I turned back to my companions to find that they were already gone. No one had even thought to nudge me on the shoulder. As some friends they are, I grumbled as I stood to merge into the crowd. Everyone dispersed quickly, considering the number of students in the cafeteria. I soon found myself standing on an unfamiliar part of the campus, with time running out to find a hiding spot. I darted forward, my heart racing. I couldn't lose, and not this early. I desperately searched my surroundings, praying that something would pop out to me, but nothing did. I sprinted through the grass, losing hope. I hadn't seen a single one of my classmates since the moment that I had stepped outside. They were some tough competition. And then to my utter horror, I heard one of the doors to the cafeteria click shut. I was out of time. I ran as quickly as my legs would carry me, not looking back. Suddenly, I was grabbed from behind. And this is it, I thought. This is how I'm going to die. I tried to scream, but a hand covered my mouth. I glanced up, terrified of what I would see. Clara was not who I was expecting to find. She pulled me upright, and then she put a finger to her lips and motioned for me to follow. She didn't have to tell me twice. I watched as she disappeared behind a row of bushes lining a wall, barely rustling the leaves. I crouched down, mimicking her, and found myself in a small clearing. The way the bushes were trimmed allowed for ample room to move around. Someone had cut them like that on purpose. Mere moments passed before Clara nudged me in the arm. She pointed at something through the leaves. When I saw it, all the color drained from my face. From my vantage point, I could make out a hulking shadow. Red eyes burned in its skull, and it dragged a massive meat cleaver behind it. The thing must have been 7 or 8 feet tall. I had never seen anything so monstrous. The beast suddenly stopped, its terrible eyes searching like spotlights. My breath hitched in my throat when they locked onto me. Were we hidden enough? Could it see us? I stifled my breathing. The seconds felt like hours as I waited for the thing to make its move. And then it did. Without warning, the beast turned its head and continued along its path. I released a sigh of relief. I had never experienced true terror until that moment. And it wasn't long before all that fear came thundering back. Because just seconds later, I heard the most blood-curdling scream that I've ever heard in my entire life. I turned to Clara, my face as pale as a sheet. She didn't make eye contact. Instead, she shook her head and glanced down at the dirt. Eventually, the thick silence that ensued was shattered by the crackle of a PA system from overhead.
Attention students, the game is now over.
Clara didn't say anything to me, not one word. Instead, she turned and marched back toward the cafeteria. Okay, what the hell was that? I shouted, unable to contain myself any longer. RJ shrugged. Just a normal day at Shadow Grove Academy. Better get used to it, he said. Yeah, Danny piped in. Now you see what we're talking about. Clara glared at me from her seat at my desk. I wanted to thank her for saving my life, but her death stare told me I better keep my mouth shut. I get why you inhale your food now. You kind of lose your appetite after something like that. Yeah, RJ said. Anyway, this hot chick in my algebra class told me that she thinks you and... Wait a second. Are you really going to gloss over this like nothing happened? Some kid probably died out there and you're acting like it's just another random Tuesday. I mean, this has to be illegal, right? Is there something that we can do? Clara stood and marched over to me. She had a fury in her eyes that sent a chill rippling down my spine. Look, RJ already told you. It's just another normal day. What do you expect us to do, report it to the cops? And say what? Hey officer, I go to this crummy school for troubled kids, and there's this 8-foot-tall monster that chases us around the courtyard. Yeah, it sounds real convincing, doesn't it? I was taken aback by her outburst. That was the most that Clara had said to me since I had met her. I turned to Danny and RJ for reassurance, but their expressions made it clear. I was on my own. Yeah, I guess you're right. That doesn't sound like such a great idea. Clara gave me one last nasty look before storming out of the room. Dang, Danny said, heading for the door. I'll go get her. RJ and I shared a glance. That girl really doesn't like me, does she? Oh, it's nothing personal, he replied, rubbing the back of his neck. This whole thing has always been a touchy subject for her. Best to leave it alone. As much as I wanted to do just that, I couldn't. This was potentially a matter of life and death. Besides, Clara seemed like she knew something that I didn't. And I had a feeling that whatever it was, it would be crucial to piece together the mystery behind this place. I spent that evening familiarizing myself with the courtyard. That's where the game was held. According to RJ, automatic locks activated on any door leading to another part of the school after the start of the game, so this was the only place there was. I knew that in order to win, I had to get my bearings down. The more I snooped, the more hiding spots I noticed, and with each new discovery, I became more and more perplexed. An oak tree had been hollowed out, leaving enough room for a person to fit inside. A patch of crabgrass was removable, hiding a coffin-like structure beneath the earth. A red tulip in a flower bed activated a trapdoor, unveiling a small room. But why? Someone had clearly put a lot of work into this. What did they stand to gain from it all? When I glanced up, the answer hit me like a ton of bricks. Dozens of cameras were stationed close to the roof. We weren't just being hunted. Someone was recording it. I tried to convince my friends to come up with a plan to fight back, but none of them went for it. Even after I brought up the cameras, Danny and RJ didn't seem to care. So what? RJ said, nose deep in a comic book. It doesn't seem like that big of a deal to me. It's not like they're gonna sell the footage or anything. That's not the point, I shouted, pacing around the room. And these sickos are getting off on playing this messed up game and recording it for their amusement. Oh, and by the way, have you seen the lunch lady? I mean, what is that thing? It can't be human. It's like we're in some kind of screwed up nightmare simulator. I don't understand how you guys are so nonchalant about this. And Danny sighed. He placed a hand on my shoulder and he met my gaze. Look, Jordan, it's not that we don't care about it or that we don't think it's absolutely messed up. Believe me, we do. It's just that we've come to terms with the fact that there's nothing that we can do about it. We're the screw-ups of the world. Nobody will believe a word that we say. Trust me, some of us have tried before, and the only place that it got them was the loony bin. I averted my gaze and stared at the wall. Maybe he was right. We somehow made it a week without being selected for the game again. After my first experience, I found myself absolutely dreading lunchtime. If I could just make it through that, the rest of the day was smooth sailing. Usually nothing happened, but that Tuesday something did. I was following the others' lead, wolfing down a chicken sandwich when my fears came to fruition. The lights shut off, and those red, luminous numbers started to count down. I didn't waste my time. I followed the mass of students out the doors and into the courtyard. My classmates disappeared behind bushes, under flower beds, beneath patches of grass. Meanwhile, I found myself scrambling for a hiding spot. Again. That's when I noticed Danny heading for an oak tree. I decided to tag along with him. When I reached the base, I was out of breath. Danny had already climbed up to a branch that I couldn't see. It wasn't hard to figure out how he had gotten up there so quickly. The tree had a set of rungs embedded into its bark. Somebody had made it easily accessible. I scaled the steps and I found the branch that Danny was sitting on. "Mind if I join you?" I asked, nodding to the spot beside him. You shouldn't have followed me up here. This branch isn't sturdy enough for the two of us. Find a different hiding place." I stared at him for a moment, stunned by his cold demeanor. "There's not enough time for that. I'll just stand here and wait it out." "Whatever, just shut up. It'll hear us." I nodded and peered out from the leaves. I was fairly confident that the thing wouldn't be able to spot us, but I couldn't be sure. Most of my view was obscured by greenery, but I could still make out bits and pieces. That same nagging thought from the last time returned. If I could see out, then could it see in? I wouldn't have to wait long to find the answer. Moments later, I heard a door click shut. This was it. The game had begun. I held my breath as the seeker came into view. It dragged its meat cleaver behind it, leaving a trail in the dirt. I watched as it approached a bush. It stared at it as if considering uprooting the entire thing before it moved on, leaving it untouched. It began stalking closer. And that's when I seriously messed up. My foot slipped on a rung. My shoe squeaked against the metal bar, producing an ear-piercing screech that cut through the silence like a knife. Red, glowing eyes connected with mine, and the beast made a beeline for the tree. And this was it. I had screwed up big time. "And good going, idiot," Danny said as the monster made it to the base of the tree. "You got yourself killed. Go on, jump. I'm not paying for your mistake." He gave me a shove. I nearly slipped and lost my balance, but I was able to grab onto something solid. Danny's wrist. I didn't even mean to pull him forward. I was only trying to keep my footing. But regardless of my intentions, I had caused Danny to slip. I will never forget that look in his eyes. The betrayal and confusion burning into his irises is something that will haunt me until the day that I die. To my horror, Danny released a guttural shriek, and a split second later, he hit the ground. He immediately went still, a pool of crimson blossoming from his head. The behemoth paused on the second rung, glanced at my friend's motionless body, and descended the steps. It slung Danny over its shoulder and vanished. Moments later, a voice came over the intercom. "Attention students, the game is now over." I remained rooted to the spot. Tears overwhelmed me, and I cried. I was dreading telling RJ and Clara for the rest of the day. I wasn't sure if they already knew or if I was going to have to break it to them. Either way, the guilt was eating me alive. Danny had lost because of me. If I had picked a different hiding place, none of this would have happened. Once classes ended, I went directly to my dorm. I wanted to get there before RJ so that I could go over what to tell them. But when I walked in, I found that he had beaten me there. "Hey man, what's up?" he said, pulling out a math textbook as he slung his backpack to the floor. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Everything okay?" I could feel the tears welling up again. This was going to be difficult. "RJ, look, there's something that I have to tell you." He gazed up at me with a questioning look in his eyes. "It's about Danny. I think that I got him killed. We were hiding in the same tree and one thing led to another and he fell. The lunch lady got him. RJ, Danny lost the game and it's all my fault." I was overcome with emotion. I cried right in front of him, not caring if he judged me for it. RJ didn't freak out like I had expected him to. Instead, he waited for me to stop crying and looked me directly in the eyes before he spoke. And Jordan, I'm sure all of that's true, but who's Danny? I stared at him, wondering if it was an ill-timed joke. What do you mean, who's Danny? You know, our friend. The one that we hang out with every day. Clara's boyfriend, Danny. RJ cocked his head to the side like a curious dog. Are you sure you're okay? Like, are you schizo or something? I don't know a Danny. Clara's been single for years. She's not dating anyone. I couldn't believe that he was doing this. RJ, this isn't a game. You know Danny. You've got a picture of him hanging up on your corkboard. See, it's right. I studied the photo and my blood turned ice. It had depicted RJ and Danny in front of the school fountain with big, stupid grins plastered across their faces. I know it did. But now, RJ was alone. I couldn't come up with a logical explanation for it. None of my classmates remembered Danny either. His desk in science class wasn't empty, it was just gone. There wasn't even a hint to indicate that he had ever existed in the first place. It was as if he had snapped out of everyone's memories. Everyone except for me. The whole thing was enough to drive me mad. But then, just when I thought that I had reached my breaking point, things got even worse. I was sitting at lunch with RJ and Clara, nibbling at a sad plate of chicken salad. Clara looked worse for wear. She was in a mood, probably still pissed at me from the other day, and she wasn't talking to us. Meanwhile, RJ was just as chipper as ever, completely oblivious to the pain that I was suffering through. Guys, why aren't you eating? The game could start at any minute, you know. Clara crinkled her nose before looking at her runny mashed potatoes and deciding that she wasn't interested. I sighed, glancing at my food and then back to RJ, before my eyes flew back to the plate again. I could have sworn that there, among the chicken and mayo, was something that I recognized. I pinched it between my fingers and pulled. When I realized what it was, it took everything in me not to throw up. I was holding a piece of flesh, one imprinted with a stick-and-poke tattoo of a smiley face in faded ink, the same one that Danny had on his index finger. RJ furrowed his brows, trying to come to terms with what he was looking at. Clara immediately went pale. I watched as her eyes darkened and her head hit the table. A sea of students gasped from all around us. Clara was drawing a crowd. Soon a teacher rushed over to her and shook her shoulders. Clara groggily opened her eyes and glanced up at Mrs. Rodriguez. Where am I? Oh, you poor thing, let's get you to the nurse's office. Will one of you boys be so kind as to accompany her? She asked, probing RJ and me for an answer. I'll do it, I said, standing up from my seat. I got a nagging feeling that Clara's reaction wasn't just from the fact that I had found a chunk of human flesh in my food. She was hiding something, and I was confident that I knew what it was. Not feeling any better, I asked as Clara and I walked back from the nurse's office. You can say that, she replied, failing to meet my gaze. So I know what happened in the cafeteria was disturbing, but is there something that you're not telling me? I don't want to have this conversation with you, she said, picking up her pace. Clara, we need to have this conversation. After what happened with Danny, She stopped her tracks upon hearing his name. She looked me in the eyes as tears began to trickle down her cheeks. You remember him too? I nodded. She crashed into me, burying her face in my shirt. I let her do it. I didn't say a word as her cries echoed down the hallway. Clara called me over to her dorm later that evening. She said that we needed to have an emergency meeting. No arguments there. I found myself sitting in an uncomfortable chair staring at a Metallica poster hanging up on her side of the room. The other side was barren. I could have guessed what happened to her roommate. All right, Clara said, arms folded as she leaned against her bed frame. I'm going to get straight to the point. I've been trying to find someone like you for a long time. You're the first person that I've met who can actually remember them. I nodded, drinking in her words. So does this mean you have a plan? Whatever you need me to do, count me in. I don't want to lose anyone else. Clara pursed her lips and let the silence linger before she turned to me and spoke. Hey, I'm glad you're on board. This is gonna take some serious commitment. Oh yeah, why's that? Clara maintained fierce eye contact, her stern expression never wavering. Because we're going to kill the principal. I stared at her dumbfounded. You've gotta be kidding me. When I said anything, I didn't mean murder. Yeah, I want this abomination gone too, believe me. But there has to be some way to do it without landing us behind bars, right? No, Clara said, her voice barely a whisper. I've already tried everything else. Like what? There's gotta be. Like what? Like everything. Do you know how hard it is to get people to believe that your lunch lady is an ungodly monster from hell who eats people? I did everything you can think to do short of burning the whole place down. I tried posting on social media, I tried calling the cops. Hell, I even tried taking photos of it. No one listens. They all thought that I was crazy. Crazy Clara with another psycho conspiracy theory, right? God, I'm so tired of nobody listening to a word that I say. I haven't even managed to convince RJ of what we're dealing with. You think I'm lying, try it for yourself if you're so confident. But when it doesn't work out, I'll be right here to say, oh, I told you so. Okay, I believe you, I said, trying to calm her down. So the plan is to take out the principal. I know Sharpley is weird, but what did she do? And how does the lunch lady tie into it? And Clara closed her eyes and took a deep breath, exhaling slowly. Sorry, I got a little worked up, she said, the color in her cheeks returning to its normal hue. I'm pretty sure that Sharpley is controlling that thing. The lunch lady isn't a lady at all if you haven't guessed it. It's not even human for that matter. I think Sharpley is some kind of witch and the lunch lady is a golem. It's not real. I thought about it for a moment, letting her revelation sink in. Hey, as insane as that sounds, it makes sense. I've never met anyone who looks like that, and the cameras being all over the courtyard. At first, I thought somebody was selling the tapes or getting some kind of sick pleasure from our suffering, but maybe she needs them to control the golem. Now you're catching my drift. Okay, so the principal is a golem-wielding witch who eats her students' souls and chops up their bodies to save money on mystery meat. Now that we're on the same page about that, what are we gonna do about it? Like I said, we're gonna kill Sharpley, Clara retorted, crossing her arms. Yeah, I got that. But how? Well, I have a plan, but I don't think you're going to like it. I sighed, searching her expression. She was dead set on this. Go ahead, lay it on me. Okay, so as far as I know, no one really gets called into the principal's office at Shadow Grove. The teachers are mostly the ones in charge of reprimanding students. In my 2 years at this school, I can only think of one incident where a kid got called to the office. His name was Devin Sykes. She looked at me as if she expected that name to ring a bell. It didn't. And what did Devin Sykes do? Oh, he pulled the fire alarm and went streaking through the hallway. Once he was fully clothed again, he got called to the principal's office. No one saw him after that. I am the only one who still remembers. I pursed my lips. Devin's convenient disappearance didn't shock me in the slightest. So what you're saying is, we've got to do something big. So big that it's grounds for expulsion. Do I have that right? Clara nodded. I took a deep breath. Well, I hated this good-for-nothing school anyway, and now that I think about it, I kinda like this plan. We save a bunch of lives, and I won't have to go to this crummy academy anymore. And it'll be a big middle finger to my mom and crappy stepdad for dumping me here in the first place. I'm in. Oh, really? Well, that was easier than I thought, Clara said, shooting me a devious grin. My expression dropped. I didn't like the way she was smiling at me. I'm glad you're on board, because we're gonna do something insane, like really insane, and you're going to be the star of the show. I suddenly wasn't feeling very chipper about this whole thing. I'm terrified to ask, but what is that insane thing exactly? Claire's grin grew even wider. You'll see. The next day I found myself sitting amidst the entire school in my gymnasium. It just so happened that we were having a pep rally that day. Apparently those were put on by the administration once per semester in order to boost morale. I was sweating bullets waiting for it to start. Once the cheerleaders came out and got into formation, I stood up from my seat in the bleachers. I didn't know if I would be able to muster the courage to do what I was about to do, but it was now or never. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. People were starting to stare. I nearly froze up, but then I reminded myself of what was at stake. We had to do this. No one else needed to lose their life. I bolted down the steps like a madman. Once I reached the bottom, I whipped my shirt off and swung it around in the air, whooping and hollering as I ran. I bolted up to the nearest cheerleader before she even had a chance to react, and I pulled a vending machine moon pie from my pocket. I felt awful for that girl. The fear in her eyes as I smushed that moon pie in her face is something that I'll never forget. A collective gasp erupted from the crowd. The cheerleaders stopped their routine, and all eyes were on me. I could have died from embarrassment right then and there. And just when it seemed like it couldn't get any worse for my reputation, it did. Clara ran from the other side of the gym screaming like a banshee. She had ripped a fire extinguisher off the wall and she was racing toward me. Without warning, she sprayed the fire extinguisher at me, catching a few cheerleaders in the blast zone. I sprinted away with Clara in hot pursuit. Kids in the stands were starting to laugh. I realized that some of them probably thought it was all part of the show. After a few seconds though, a smile inched across my lips. This was kind of fun. But that warm feeling was instantly shattered. In a split second, I felt a blinding pain and I realized that someone was on top of me, pinning me to the ground. One of the teachers had leapt into action, stopping my rambunctious display before I could cause any more damage. I glanced over to find Clara struggling against our math teacher. I sighed. The fun part was over with. What came next was going to suck. Clara and I found ourselves standing outside the principal's office, eyes glued to the ground like some naughty toddlers. I just don't know what got into you two, Mrs. Alvarado said for the millionth time, shaking her head. The shame of what I had done had long since set in. Clara and I couldn't even look at each other. Still, I couldn't help but crack a smile. The plan had gone off without a hitch. Mr. Dillinger, the teacher who had slammed me to the ground, tightened his grip on my shoulder. You really messed up, kid. The school doesn't mess around with troublemakers like you. Chances are your time at Shadow Grove Academy has come to an end. I didn't even have a chance to respond before the door to Principal Sharpley's office creaked open. We waited for an invitation to enter but received none. Well, I guess that's our cue, Clara said, taking a step forward. I nodded, turning back to Mr. Dillinger. Nice knowing you, Teach. Thanks for the shiner. Oh, and a word of advice. Ditch the toupee. It looks like crap. Mr. Dillinger and Mrs. Alvarado just stood and watched as Clara and I disappeared into Principal Sharpley's office. The room was just as creepy as I thought it would be. It was dimly lit, bathed in an iridescent purple glow. Sharpley was seated in her chair, facing away from us like a typical movie villain. When she turned around, I could see why she was reluctant to show her face. Irina Sharpley was not a good-looking woman. Her nose was large and lumpy and her face was covered in warts, and her teeth rivaled that of a beaver. If she really was a witch, she definitely looked the part. Take a seat, children, she said, hands folded across her desk. Clara and I traded a glance as we followed her command. "We know what you are," I said before she had a chance to continue. "Oh, do you?" "Yeah," Clara interjected. "We know about the school lunches, the golem, the missing kids, the cameras, all of it. And we know that you're the one pulling the strings." A grin inched across Sharpley's face. It made me want to vomit. "Well, isn't that something? It appears that I have a real Sherlock Holmes and Watson on my hands. Assuming you're correct, what do you intend to do with this information? Expose me, call the authorities. Oh, be my guest." "That's not what we have in mind at all," I said, reaching for my pocket. The smug grin that I was wearing instantly faded from my lips. "What's going on? I can't move." "What the hell? Neither can I," Clara said. Principal Sharpley glared at us with an intensity that I had never seen before. Her eyes radiated a luminescent green. This wasn't good. She was even more powerful than I had thought. "So your master plan was to kill me. Smart kids. But you're not the first to try, and I'm sure you won't be the last. Such a shame that it has to end like this. I was rooting for you two to survive the game. Oh well. Say your goodbyes. No one's going to remember you where you're going." Sharpley's jaw fell open, exposing a wide, gaping maw. Her face shifted and contorted until her cavernous mouth was lined with rows upon rows of sharp, serrated teeth. I closed my eyes. This was it. We had failed, and for that, we were going to pay the ultimate price. The door to Sharpley's office flew open. I turned to face the figure in the doorway. It was RJ. It took me a moment to realize what had just happened and the implications of it. I could move again. RJ's intrusion had caused Sharpley to break eye contact. That gave us just enough time. Clara produced a water balloon filled with gasoline from her purse, and in that moment, I thanked our lucky stars that the maintenance shed had been so easy to break into. I stepped back and Clara tossed the balloon at Sharpley's chest. A direct hit. "Jordan, now!" I already had the lighter ready. It ignited on my first flick. In the blink of an eye, Sharpley's blouse was up in flames. She unleashed an inhuman screech as she was set ablaze. She tried to drop to the ground and snuff out the fire, but it was no use. None of us helped her. Instead, Clara raced over to the smoke alarm and covered it with a plastic bag to prevent it from going off. Sharpley's face had shifted and contorted. Her eyes grew more desperate, but still nobody lifted a finger. I had never heard anything so awful. In a matter of minutes, her screams died down and she went limp. Clara, RJ, and I stared at what was left of her, too stunned to move. I glanced at my friends who wore horrified expressions on their faces. Talking about killing someone is one thing, but actually going through with it is another, even if that person is some demonic, soul-eating witch. "Look," RJ said, pointing to the body. It had begun to disintegrate before our eyes. Soon nothing was left aside from a smoldering pile of ash. A smile inched across each of our faces. The nightmare was finally over. As it turns out, Clara had told me a white lie when she had gone over the plan with me. She had partially managed to convince RJ. She included him as a backup due to the fact that none of us knew how powerful Sharpley really was, and it's a good thing that she did, because without him I wouldn't be telling this story right now. Irina Sharpley is officially listed as a missing person. Fortunately for us, no one noticed when we threw the rug with her ashes into the school dumpster. Apparently all the cameras in the school were allocated to the courtyard and not the trash. All the students and the staff were at the assembly, so nobody heard the commotion in our office. We were listed as suspects, but without any evidence. That's all we'll ever be. Clara and I still got expelled. The administration took our punishment into their hands after Sharpley's disappearance, and good riddance. Mom nearly bit my head off when she got word, but I could live with that. According to RJ, our mission was successful. We had managed to put a stop to the game. I have no regrets about what we did. I can only hope that the next school I attend isn't half as strange as Shadow Grove Academy.